Go ahead, Topher.
I would just like to hear your viewpoint on Antarctica and the findings and um, girls upstairs. Sorry. The Antarctica stuff that was on Broken Antlers Chat today really intrigued me, but also I would just like to hear the everything you have from your, I think it was your brother-in-law or sister-in-law, whatever it was, just the story that you have about all that stuff, because obviously all of us have been waiting to hear about 2.0. And me truly, I feel that it's something that Tori's holding back from truly expressing and waiting for us to come to that point realization of what is going on there. And then when I read your stuff, it's complete opposite. So just kind of what you know as your information, all that kind of stuff, what's there, what it truly is, and that.
Oh, sure. Well, it's my middle brother, Carly. He's a trauma surgeon and works in emergency rooms most of the year. Now, he takes expedition jobs down in Antarctica, and he's down there just about every year. Sometimes he even goes on 2 expeditions. They go during the summer, and they come out of Argentina. Boat ride's about $5,000, so it's not for everyone. The equipment that you're going to need to actually be permitted to go is about $50,000. Now you can go on the high end and go. He spent 150 to get everything that he uses. Now you pack out everything that you're going to need to stay alive. Now the reason why there's the restriction is that someone trying to save your life puts their life in danger. So every single person has to be independently able to survive a negative 60 environment. And that negative 60 can blow in a heartbeat. Now, a couple of things. There is a lot of people who believe in the story of Atuin. And if you research back and actually find out what the source of it is, the etymology of it, it comes from a Shastra that was many, many years ago, prior to the 4th century. And it was included in Vedic artwork in the 4th century. Now, the 4th century description or interpretation of the description was drawn out as a flat surface because they were unaware of what was actually going on. And they show an ice wall, they show all the things that you see in the flat earth descriptions. They're identical to the story of Atuin. Now, in some of the temples, they have an artwork that is considered reverend, that shows a flat disc with a mountain in the center and an ice wall out at the ridge. But if you go back to the actual vision, the Shastra is like a visionary thing, sort of like remote viewing or any of the other things. The guy's actually describing very much what we see when we do satellite imagery or even balloon imagery. If you don't believe we can get above the atmosphere, then fine, you can even do it below the atmosphere. But the elevation of the North Pole from the center of the potato-shaped thing that is the Earth is quite a bit higher. So the idea there being a mountain, yes, it is actually higher in elevation. So yeah, it could be considered a mountain. He also stated that the atmosphere clings to the surface like a drop of water or a bubble over the surface of the Earth. Now, that description was interpreted as being a dome. Now, there are other scientific concepts about prior to a comet strike that happened about 35,000 years ago, that we had a hydrogen layer, high pressure hydrogen layer up at where the ionosphere is today, and that the Earth's atmosphere was about 2 times what its current pressure is. The oxygen content was about 22% to 40%, rather than just the 19 to 21 that we have now.
Okay, I just have a quick question when it comes to that stuff.
Sure.
Is that just a point in that, or is that the whole entire aspect of Antarctica? I mean, I'm just trying to grasp. You know, people say that nope, this is the living aspect of right here, but my question is, when you're talking about this, is every aspect of Antarctica covered where this is all?
No, no. Actually, if you take a look at photographs of McMurdo Bay, a lot of the guys that go down there take selfies. So these are uncensored photographs. And what you'll see there is McMurdo Bay station is actually built on a giant coal heap. So someone was down there mining and piled up that coal sometime in the past. Another aspect of it is that there are these hot spots where temperature is 60 degrees or more year round. It never freezes. There's butterflies and insects and everything else there. One of the things that's kind of interesting is there is architecture of an old civilization. And this is the biggest problem for science because in the 1800s, it was conclusively determined by proclamation that incrementalism was the only way possible that evolution could take place, and that we needed to have eons of time in order for evolution to take place. Therefore, everything must be measured in dendritic time, meaning that every layer has to be a specific epoch, like a tree ring. You know, a tree ring has one a year, right? So even our ice cores are measured in with this thing. The dating is so crazy. Now, another aspect is that when we start getting carbon dating in the 50s, they put a block of material out, I believe it was 1958, and measured the sun's effect on it for 1 year. And they used that as the standard for dating a year. Well, we know that the solar radiation and cosmic radiation varies from year to year. It varies from day to day. Now, these quantifications of the 1800s all the way up to modern day are suppositions, and they always have to reinforce the authority of the academic. So if you look at it, I've run into this where I was doing some work with Grosh University on fuel cells, and the individuals I was working with had spent their entire lives in academia. So anything that was more than 5% outside of their wheelhouse was a threat to their authority. So finding that charge carriers could move faster in certain circumstances than what was predicted by the standard model was a big problem for them. And they fought it, literally fought it as hard as they possibly could. So this same aspect creates this knowledge filtration in our science. But if you go back and you take a look at our history, about 1635, 1638, with Descartes, I guess is how you say it, they proclaimed their authority. And all the way up to the 1805, the standard basis of philosophical science was codified. So scientism is a form of religion. So when we look at the fallacies of it, the immediate fall through is to go to the limited hangouts that are provided for us, like Atuin, or the idea that there's land beyond the Great Ice Wall, which was actually the Vril and the Thule Society in World War II. The Nazis wanted to have land down there, which they did. They actually set up facilities down there. But there's stuff in Antarctica that is 20 to 30,000 years older. And there's stuff that's contemporary with the pyramids. And when I say stuff, we're talking There's pyramids down there. They're visible in the selfies. They're visible in the actual official documents, and visible even on Google Earth. But the problem is that science cannot recognize them and maintain their funding as academic authorities, because those who decide who gets funding are also threatened by information that may change their authoritative status. So you have to incrementally bring things in, or as they used to say, you have to wait for the professor to die before the textbook can be rewritten. So hopefully that answered the question.
So my last question, and then I want to listen to everybody else. But when it comes to the Antarctic 2.0, what is your viewpoint with the Tory family that comes down to that aspect of it?
I'm not a frequent listener of Tori. In fact, it's been several months since I've listened to her show. I'm not in opposition. I'm freestanding. I'm not part of the Tory crowd. I just have some friends in it. As far as Tories, I don't know what Antarctic 2.0 stands for. That's something that I'm not aware of. So.
Sounds good. Nope, I appreciate all your, and that's a big thing. There's so much going on there, and it comes down to the aspect of truly knowing what is there. You have family there, all that stuff, and I think there's just a lot of open books and all that is not fully discovered or fully talked about, that has truly been hidden behind the doors, and it's just a matter of time before everyone.
Great segue on the doors, because one of the big issues is the doorways are 31 to 35 foot tall and about 16 foot wide. So obviously the people who built the rise on the stairs was the other thing. 52 inches high, 52 inches deep on the stairs. So those aren't us, and those are definitely all over the place. You can find them at Machu Picchu, you can find them at Ollantaytambo, you can find them at Baalbek. So there was definitely a bigger group of people here before.
Awesome, Dave. Well, thank you so much for your time and letting me speak, and I greatly appreciate it.
No worries, man.
Hey, Dave, before we go on any further, can I ask you to turn your speakers down or mute yourself when other people are talking?
Oh, sure. I'm giving you an echo. Yeah, let me turn it down.
Oh, so much. Yeah, it's getting much better. Something I'd just like to add, and none of us have all the answers, and we're all looking at different sources for information, but it's also important to remember, like when you're talking about the time, when you look at some of these old texts and things for information that has been misinterpreted or lost to time, people of those older eras, they weren't looking at things through a materialistic worldview. Some of these things you have to put on, I'm not talking a biblical set of glasses, but a bigger perspective. These were people that, they were one with the earth and with nature. They watched the stars every night. They knew, where all of the different, they were star watchers. So a lot of this stuff, when you talk about the Shastras and the Vedas and things like that, and they're describing things like Atuin, that has over time been taken as a misinterpretation for flat, people to think that the earth is flat. You kind of have to view it as more of a psychonautic type, they were psychonauts basically. So just wanted to put that
absolutely.
out there. I just wanted to put that out there for people, because that was a big turning point for me when I understood the way that the ancients thought and their relationship with the cosmos. The things that were recorded that we are interpreting from a total materialism point of view, you're never going to get there. So I'm going to bring on Luke next. I think he was next to have his hand up.
Hey, man, how you doing tonight? I think he fell asleep.
Okay, we'll bring on UC next. She's got her hand up.
Hey, how you doing, UC?
Okay, so I didn't know I had to unmute myself. Sorry. Uh, so can you guys still hear me? Because I'm on like a headset thing connected to my phone. Coming in clear?
Yeah, you're fine. 5x5.
Okay, thanks. Um, okay, I guess actually, Sarah answered that question. I texted Alex and I was like, I think Dave is using an external microphone on his computer. Um, is that how you're doing this
Yeah,
stream?
I actually have a studio mic here in front of my desk, and you'll hear in the background I have a print that's been running since 5 a.m., so I can't cancel it or pause it. It'll be over within the hour.
A print? What's a print?
3D print of a plastic part that I'm making.
Oh, cool. Dude, you got one of those 3D printers. So jealous. Dang it. Okay, Antarctica. All right. So, my question with the Antarctica discussion, and I just got into like in here not too long ago. I realized that my husband was on. I was like hanging up some shelves for my daughters in their room, and so I don't know if this was asked already, but do you um do you know what the significance of the penguins in Antarctica? um Tori has said that they can filter nitrogen in a very specific way, but she hasn't like divulged into how penguins filter nitrogen, because what Antarctica 1.0 was, it was actually done, I believe, in 2020. And she said in that podcast, I'll DM it to you if you want to take a listen. It's not very long. But she said that they need, and I don't know who they is, but I'm pretty sure it has something to do with those that may have been here before us that changed the human DNA to make us slaves, right? And so they need it's never been about carbon, because carbon has 0.003% in the atmosphere, but nitrogen has 76% in the atmosphere. So it seems like the target is on nitrogen, not carbon. So then she said in Antarctica, it's actually at 68%. So carbon in the atmosphere, it actually changes with the demographics, right? And so she said they need it below 50%. And so then I was thinking, I'm like, okay, is this why the penguins are there? Because they can filter nitrogen in like certain ways? I don't know. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, their piss actually, um, their piss is actually high in nitrogen. So maybe she's speaking of that as far as the filtration. Now, the gradient is a thermal gradient. So if I drop the temperature in a box and have regular atmosphere in the temperature, if I drop it down below 30 degrees, it'll start to have less and less nitrogen and more oxygen. That's why some people will travel to areas that are very cold and they feel invigorated by it. Now, as far as something needing a lower nitrogen, well, theoretically, the folks that were here prior to 35,000 years ago um, lived in an environment that was 22 to 42% oxygen. So they had a much higher oxygen content in the air. Now, the resurrection of those people, all of that, I'm not. I'm not one that actually believes that that's a goal. I think more than that, there are probably bodies down there. That would be my estimation, because the catastrophe that happened, it wasn't incremental. It didn't drift over a million years. It happened very quickly. And the ground truth I know on that is east of Lima, Peru, there's a rock wall. And that rock wall is a shear face fault. And the bitumen is still running out of the fault. So the bitumen is the decomposition product of plants, and it's not what makes oil. It's a little bit different. It has a left-handed chirality where petrochemicals have a right-handed chirality. It's kind of like like adipose, like fat tissue. It's runny black stuff. It can be made into asphalt, but it doesn't make the best asphalt. But that stuff's running out of the rock face. So that's telling me that geologically that rock face is relatively new. Because if it was eons old, that material would have oozed out long time ago. Thinking that there's a biologic mass that formed that material would eventually run out. And it's still dripping out of the sides of the mountains down there. Now, when you look at Peru, you see that Lima is indented in South America. And you'll see that the Humboldt Ridge in the Humboldt Sea is right at the same latitude as Lima. And the whole of South America seems to have been pushed hard to the west. Causing the indentation, causing the Andes Mountains to be pushed up very rapidly. Now, when you look north of there is the evidence, like in Florida here, there's a place called Blowing Rocks that has exposed ancient coral reef that's about 12 feet above ground. It looks like the rim of a crater. Now, the center point on that crater would be somewhere around Cozumel. And when you look at the floor of the Gulf of Mexico, which I happen to have made the cameras back in '98 to do the assay, so I got to see the actual floor of the Gulf of Mexico, it looks like a giant crater. Now, that looks like it happened about 35,000 years ago, which corresponds with the Sumerian actual texts, not the Sitchin translation, but the actual text, because people can read cuneiform. It's not a dead language. It's a living language. People read it now. So when Sitchins wrote it, he combined in the story of Enlil and Enki and brought in all kind of beliefs that were from various other theological concepts. And what actually happened was, it looks like a bolide, which is a big chunk of ice, hit the earth about 35,000 years ago and caused a deformation. Now, on the exact opposite side of the earth, when we look to the east of Diego Garcia in the Indian Ocean, we see that there's a big sunken pocket there, a deep water pocket there. And the legends in the Ramayana, it speaks of an island there, a continent that actually is no longer there. Now, there's bridges that go down the Adams Causeway. Goes from the south of India over to Sri Lanka. And in Sri Lanka, there's bridges that extend out into the Indian Ocean. Causeway, the piles of rocks that look like they were leading to something. Now, in my opinion, and I don't have complete validity to this, but I think that it's possible that the landmass that we know as Antarctica shifted from someplace in the Indian Ocean southward when that hit, because the bulge on the Indian Ocean side from something hitting on the Gulf of Mexico side would have been sufficient enough to cause crustal displacement. Now, there's a couple of other people, Velikovsky, Russian guy back in the 30s, I think it was looking at drawings in caves and on walls and ancient sites where it showed some kind of a celestial event that happened. The Sumerian story talks about uh, a planet called Tiamat colliding with Mars, and that would make sense. There's a 400-foot wall in at the equator of Mars, and the elevation drops 400 feet, and there's no water to speak of on Mars. And when we look at the Earth's oceans, we find that the water of the Pacific Ocean is significantly different than the water of the Atlantic Ocean, and that the two actually form a boundary. And you can look this up online. There's actually a line where the green water is the Pacific Ocean and the blue water is the Atlantic Ocean. So it's it's possible, and this is pretty loose. There's good evidence showing that around that same time period, about 35,000 years ago, this group of big people died out. Now, in the Vedas, they have the story of Hanuman, which was always represented as like a 60-foot high guy. And there's also the story of Jainism, which was the great battle, and the soldier Jain stopped in the middle of battle and became enlightened by not continuing to fight. So these were creatures that were huge. Now, when you go to the Temple of Viracocha in Peru, those same proportions of the doorways are in that the primary wall. So if you think of the temple's no longer there, but the wall's still standing. It's about 600 foot long, about 60 foot tall, and it has 3 or 4 big 35-foot tall doorways. Now you go up on top of the mountain at Ollante Tambo. There's a group of 6 stones that are very well fit into the side of the hillside. And when you stand there and look down into the valley, there's actually a shallow pyramid in the valley between Ollante Tambo and where the quarry, where those stones were cut from. Now, go down further into Marcahuasi, which is down on 35, almost into Chile. There's giant sculptures. It's a giant sculpture garden. So when you go to Romania, there's an area there that they call the Carpathian, I think it's Carpathian Sphinx. It looks like a carved structure. So again, and like in Turkey, we have Baalbek has stones in it that are just enormous. And just recently, we became able to move something that big. So if you take the scale, let's say somebody's 35 foot tall, the tools and equipment that they use is going to be massive. So I do believe that there was this group of people that tall, and they died off. So are they still located in Antarctica? It's a good possibility.
Awesome. All right. Luke is back with his hand raised. We'll bring him on.
Hey, Luke, how you doing tonight? Got no sound from you, buddy, if you can hear. Hey, Luke, we're not able to hear you, so if you can, speak up.
I think you have to maybe unmute yourself, Luke. While we're waiting for Luke to figure it out.
Yeah, anyone else?
Anybody else have any questions? All right, James, go ahead.
Thank you. I'm curious if when the Nazis took their expedition down there and did surveys, if this might have been some of the areas where there are natural oases, where it isn't a permafrost condition, or if this is another area, where Lake Vostok is, and it's always been very fascinating because public figures have gone down there, from the head of the Orthodox Church to our former Secretary of State, and I was always curious if there was a reason why some of these world leaders headed down there. Thank you.
Yeah, there's big dudes and big stuff as far as what I was explaining about the people that were here before. Um, there's most likely bodies down there. I can't give a definite confirmation on that. My brother won't say. But there are some very interesting anomalies surrounding the area. There's an area where um, they call it the Blood Falls. And the amount of iron that's coming out from underneath the glacier would either indicate a hematocrit from dead bodies, or um, someone actually mining iron down there. Now, the source of it is under thousands of feet of ice, so we don't know what the source is, but there's actually red water flowing out the side of a glacier down there. Now, um, to me, that would indicate that something's there. Now, as far as the dignitaries going down there, I think this is probably what I was speaking to about the fact that um, knowledge of there being a prior civilization is contrary to both academic and religious edict, not necessarily religious faith, but the edicts of religion. So when we look at our creation story, uh, I actually happen to have read a lot of the Gnostic stuff as well. And there's one in particular that's interesting. It's called the Hypothesis of the Arconin. It's part of the Nag Hammadi. And it speaks of creatures here that made a golem, a mud man, and gave it the task, God gave it the task of naming all the creatures on earth, and that being pleased with what he did, he breathed into him a Holy Spirit and a living soul, different than what the other creatures were. This aspect of it falls in line with what some of the beliefs are about an entity known as Enki, Loki in Greek, Nordic mythology, having participated in the creation of man. Now, I don't believe that man was created as an Adama, which was what Sitchin called the slave race that was supposedly created. The reason I don't believe that is that we have a unique ability among all creatures on Earth in that we create. When I say we create, I'm not talking about us making a piece of artwork or making something unique, but we actually cause the probability fields to collapse into reality. And this is something that Schrodinger postulated with his mental exercise about the cat in the box and vial of poison, the uncertainty principle. But what's more interesting is the double slit experiment. When we intend to observe the path of an electron or the path of a photon through a confining slit, we get a particle representation. In other words, the probability collapses into an absolute, a reality. When we don't observe it, we get a band, or don't intend to observe it, we get a banding effect, like it's a wave going through. So that aspect of humankind is not found in plants. It's not found in any other fauna. It's unique to humankind, in my understanding. So the idea that we were a slave race speaks more to the goals of the people of the 18th century who invented most of the control systems that we have today.
Yeah, I definitely agree with you. I think the work of Sitchin got kind of was half truths. Same thing with like the Maro Biglino. They translate this information and take you out of one box and then go right into another false narrative with the alien thing. Um, that creative impulse that we have, that's what I have come to understand. That is the God part of us. That's the spirit within. But yeah, it's
Yeah,
fascinating. And
I'm
if
in the
anybody,
same belief on that. I've actually done I was trained by Jim Channon back in 70, 71. Last time I saw him was 1976. And Jim Channon is the guy that the CIA tapped for Project Stargate. I was in a different program called Gondola as a little kid. Basically, what they did was they identified kids that were bright and gave them opportunities. So I got to go to computer school back in '68. I was only 6 years old. I went to Wistar, was the only place that locally that had a computer that I could study computer science 2 hours a week at. So that was my participation back then. But the training, the gateway experience that Bob Monroe basically codified, actually makes you aware that our minds are not the product of our brain. It's not the product of our heart. It's not the product of our physiology. It's more accurate to say that our physiology coalesces around the body of light that is produced by our mind. Now, recent advances in biophotonics are now able to image this. We can image emotions. We can project emotions. We can project physicality. This is something that's a little bit confusing for people, but they even have torches, flashlights that can make people move their bowels spontaneously. These are all technologies that were developed off from recent discoveries in biophotonics. We can also cause people to lose weight. If I shine a 635 nanometer light at you and let it penetrate 2 centimeters into the skin, it will actually trigger the Geflin in your fat cells to be released in the interstitial space. And then if your kidneys are working right, you pee it out. You pee out an oil and you actually lose inches of mass off your body. A very cool thing. Companies called Ultra Slim is the product name. And they're FDA approved, patented, and they're out on the market now. There's also another technology that comes off from that that's called MLS, multi-spectral laser system, something like that. But it's a 635 nanometer light collimated in an 800 nanometer infrared beam, and the 635 nanometer is pulsed at 419 kilohertz. And the interesting thing is that it excites the mitosis of cells, causing rapid healing, and it also acts as a pain relief. So they're selling these treatments as a pain relief treatment in clinics all over the world now. So there's something to say about this body of light thing that's very cool. The other aspect of it is that we can modulate our own self, our bodies. I'm literally living proof of it. I'm 15 years with less than 30% kidney function, and I'm not on dialysis. So I've been able to actually maintain a physicality in spite of the fact that I don't have enough working parts. So that aspect of it is something I think everybody could learn to do. The gateway experience from Bob Monroe is a good way, without drugs, to actually realize that we extend way, way beyond our bodies. Um,
yeah, I
where
agree, Dave. I have a question for you because it takes a lot of doing these types of things and kind of peeling back layers of, I guess, conditioning. The Gateway Experiences or the Monroe Institute's series, if anybody has never done any of those practices, I highly encourage you to begin and stick with it. But I have a question for you, Dave. Where do you believe the mind is in the body, or is it in the body?
I actually don't think the mind exists in the body. I think we project into this reality our physicality. Um, the reason I say that is uh, I've worked an awful lot on trying to regenerate kidney tissue, for instance, and I've been able to regenerate one whole kidney. It still doesn't work right, but the tissue's there. So when I go get an ultrasound or whatever, the tissue's there. And the way that I've done that was I actually recorded the sound that comes off my body. When I say sound, I'm talking about multispectral imaging. So it extends from 7.8 hertz all the way out to cosmic ray frequencies. It doesn't really have a top end. Now, I've been able to create a structure based on that sound that was taken from DICOM information from an MRI that I had prior to injury. And yeah, my kidney came back. It actually grew back. Now, I need to get the arteries fixed and all that. I don't have any refinement to it. But the fact that it actually grew tissue in the shape of a sound that was projected into the body. Now, that's like medbed type stuff. And I actually did stop by and talk with Christopher Keys. That's the vaccine police guy. He's right down the street from me. Just coincidental. He moved down from Alabama. He moved into our city. And he's got 4 devices, 2 of each, of different types of, he calls them med beds. What they are is they actually bring your body back into harmony with this sound that I've mentioned before. There's a sound that's coming in from all directions from someplace outside the universe. Now, when you're in harmony with it, you have health. When you're in disharmony, it's discordant with the sound. In other words, when you have disease, it's discordant. So what he's doing is he's trying to do the entrainment using beds that vibrate and have specific sounds that are projected through the body to get the body to vibrate in those ways. And I think it's kind of interesting because if you look at the Nazarene Lord's Prayer, the way that Jesus actually prayed to God was Abawan Bashmaji, which means he who causes all things to vibrate and live. So it wasn't our Father in who art in heaven like the later translations did. So yeah, there's something there. I know that when I drive, I have a habit of driving extremely fast. I enjoy it. I also have an accuracy in my driving that's weird. I can put my vehicle into a place that's not open yet, just prior to it being open. And that enables me to drive through traffic at 100 miles an hour when the traffic's doing 50. And it's kind of a freaky thing. I extend myself out and I can actually feel the people and what they're thinking in the other cars. The scary part is that more and more people are empty. They're literally, for a while there I was feeling nothing but fear. And now there's a lot more people that have no feeling whatsoever. They're like automatons moving down the highway. Now, I take that to part of the gateway experience was that you could focus on a distant point and gain information. It's not absolute. Like, people talked about remote viewing. You'll get concepts. One of the naturals that I've seen was lady Emily Johnson, MJ. She does these paste up artwork things that have information that there's no way she could possibly know it. And in her explanation, she just feels those are the things that would make somebody happy. Well, that's the type of information that we've always had. Now, we were taught to ignore that and to do away with your pretend friend when you're a little kid and to ignore, your dreams, to ignore those gut feelings that you have. But all that's part of us. And if we learn to actually not only explore it, but utilize that, I think we can access the same technologies that were mentioned in the Vedas in the use of prana, which was in decline in the last Yuga cycle, which was the Kali Yuga. And I believe we're entering into what's called the Dwarpa Yuga in that tradition, which is the elevation of this spiritual energy, whatever you want to call it. They called it prana, so they were aware of it. Now, as far as where are we actually located? I kind of like the idea of that Unimatrix 000 in the Star Trek franchise. I do think that we have a unified connection someplace, but where that is, I'm not certain.
Yeah, I know that everything that you say, I know what you're talking about. I'm not trying to puff myself up, but these are experiences that I have explored for many years on my own. And so when you say these things, and they do, if you had asked or told me these things, 15 years ago, I would have thought you were a nut job. But because I've experienced some of them myself, and just from my own natural, instincts and inclinations, I've been drawn to study a lot of old texts, um, and try to understand what the ancients, the way they thought and what they were doing. And their nightly, they didn't have TVs. Their TV was the night sky, and that turns something on inside of a person that's indescribable. And it's like you were trying to explain, we each have these innate um, capabilities and abilities to do these things, and we don't even we just think, like you were saying, Emily, that's just the way she is. It's the way she just thought that's what other people would like. That's a spiritual gift, and not everybody can, everybody has different ones. But the location of the mind is something that I've been really kind of experimenting with and playing with in my own life. And whenever I have a big question that I want answered, I can't ever find it from another person. I say it comes from within, but it's more than that. It's like I have to connect to something else. So that's fascinating. Anybody else have any questions?
Come on, guys, don't be afraid. I mean, I'll run out of topics here if we don't get some questions.
All right, Bob, come on down. You're the next contestant.
Go ahead and click on them so it activates them. There you go.
Okay, can you hear me?
Yeah, sure can, Bob.
All right. Out of Bunker Hill, West Virginia, interested in Antarctica or Arctica, whatever everyone calls Antarctica, I guess. I'm also a flat earther, so don't cut me off, but I believe in the firmament and things like that, and a different way of the sun and moon going around our plane. I don't call it a planet, I call it a plane. But back to Antarctica. Byrd, who was it? General Byrd, when he went with his expedition, didn't he describe areas that were like green and the temperature was way above freezing? Or am I wrong?
Yeah, actually, it was Admiral Byrd, and it was the Charles Hall expedition. And again, this is, I think somebody called me the Forrest Gump of weird shit, but I bought my second house off from the grandson of Charles Hall. And one of the cool things about the Admiral Byrd diary is what we're speaking of. This was a document that sprang up back in the 50s, and it contained a lot of information that was accurate, that meant that it was probably taken from documents that during the war were labeled top secret because of a lot of the stuff that we recovered from the Nazis. And in my opinion, and this is my opinion, it rings the same as Lenny Corso's work on the Philadelphia experiment. Now, Corso worked with two other people. One of those other people happened to be the guy who actually built the degaussing coils for the Eldridge in Philadelphia Harbor. And the story that was concocted was, it was written as a work of fiction, just like the diary was. And it contained just enough information to allow people to suspend disbelief. Now, the veracity of it is not there. I know that the Flat Earth guys have a lot of faith in it, and I know that there's... I'm not going to beat people up for their faith. Now, where I differ is that in the 90s, while I was working for Motorola, my title at Motorola was Guru, and I was self-directed, so I would have to find shit to do. I didn't have a boss, so I would go around and find what projects needed help and pitch in. And I happened to be at paging headquarters here in the town that I lived in Boynton, south end of Palm Beach in Florida. And this is where the Iridium satellite project was started. It was part of the two-way paging systems for the military called Global Communicator. And one of the problems that we had, and I wrote about this today, was that we had gotten the time domain shift and calculated in the time domain, and the satellites were still not in the place that they were supposed to be. So when we would try to talk specifically to a satellite, it was always off-center. We would have to adjust for it, aim the antenna to a different point in the sky. So what they discovered, guys got together, and the satellites have gyroscopes on them, and we're using the Earth's gravitational field as a reference for navigation. And they map the whole Earth. So the sphere is not a sphere. It looks like a beat up potato. The actual map I posted earlier today, that came right off from the data that we were getting off satellites. Now, in 1981, I was doing high-lows over Honduras and Nicaragua, and we flared at 70,000 feet, and a group of us pearled out the back, and we dropped 7 minutes before opening the chute, so you know how high up we were. Nighttime drop, and I could see the curvature. I could actually see the arc. It was a purplish blue color, and new moon, so there was no backlighting or anything like that. So I can say for certain that I've seen enough evidence to show me that we are living on a globe is a loose term, but it's the atmosphere is not spherical. The land mass is not spherical. The water mass is somewhat spherical. It bulges out towards the moon, and it bulges out in the center because of centrifugal force. Now, one of the things that I actually was looking at, I was going to talk about, was if you spin a top, any mass, you spin it and create a gyroscope, there's a wobble that takes place. Now, that wobble is actually driven by the wobble of the Earth. Now, we have, see if I can remember what it's called. It's Malinsky, something like that, cycle. It's a weather cycle because of the wobble of the Earth. We don't travel in a true ellipse around the sun. There's a wobble to it, and then there's also the long progression where the North Star actually moves through the zodiac. And Sarah may be able to speak to this better than I can, but there are constellation clusters that we can see that actually have a rotation that's only possible if we are facing in different directions. So the planar surface of the Earth idea, like I was saying before, comes out of an Atuin Shastra from back before 400 AD. And what's interesting is that I kind of think that it's what's known as a limited hangout. When in the 1970s, when NASA was going to the moon, they found shit on the moon, and the days that they were showing video off from a TV set out to broadcast TV, that was due to the fact that the CIA stepped in and created what are called limited hangouts. These were alternate stories so that if somebody were looking into something, they would find this whole second layer that was untrue that eventually would push them back into the primary narrative. And, unfortunately, in my opinion, this is just my opinion, the Atuin and the Atun, which is what the Virillian Thule Society called it in World War II, and what the Justice Department is using today to try to increase the number of suspected white supremacists by associating them with the Thule Society and Nazi belief system. Yeah, that's the other limited hangout that's going on right now. This is Merrick Garland's work. A lot of the guys who are putting a lot of stuff out about the flat Earth are actually getting funding, and you can see it because if you take a look at the studios and things like that, they're, a guy who's on YouTube all of a sudden has a $40,000 studio set up. It just doesn't equate properly. So that's my thoughts on the flat Earth stuff. But now, if you can repeat your question, because I probably lost it.
No, I didn't really mean to get into the flat Earth stuff because there's a book in the Library of Congress from 1885. I think it's William Carpenter. It's like 100 proofs of a flat Earth, and that might be a good thing to read sometime. But that's way back, But
yep, I'm actually familiar with it. One of the best ones was he measured the speed of a beam traveling at right angles. That was I'm trying to remember what the name of that was. That was a specific experiment. The Einstein-Boseman experiment that was done in 1985 to show gravitational waves was a repeat of that experiment, and with refinement in instrumentation, we are actually able to measure the movement. So that was one of the key things that 1885 book actually focused on, was this idea that we don't have relative movement. So that's actually, we do have relative movement, but the scale of it is so large. The other part of it is that it's not a circumferential movement. It's a spiral. You see this everywhere in nature. We have the toroid effect. Like in bubble collapse, we have a toroid that forms, tornadoes, hurricanes, water going down a drain. All those effects are...
The entire cosmos goes in a toroidal pattern. Everything in nature does this.
Yep, and it has a spiral to it. It's actually, there's a couple of numbers that actually are associated with it. I think it's psi and phi are associated with it.
Okay. Well, really what I wanted to ask was, when Admiral Byrd, and during that expedition, can't remember which one. I think it was not the first one, but maybe the second one, when he had the encounter with the plane when he was flying, and he supposedly went out of radio contact for so much time and then came back. But during that time, he was supposedly in an area that he described.
Yeah, I remember the inner Earth parts of his.
He
his diary.
described it in that radio show, and I think it was over in Britain or somewhere. The Longines Watch Hour.
Yeah, if you go back, I had it just a second ago. It was the
Yeah, he died. Didn't he die shortly after that
yeah, yeah.
interview?
No, there was
He
all
had a
kind
heart
of creepy
attack.
stuff with him. But if you go back and you take a look at Jules Verne's Journey to the Center of the Earth,
Okay.
okay, and then you take a look at Admiral Byrd's writings, they were almost identical. There was also, again, weirdness. My wife's family, her father and her grandfather were the electricians for George Westinghouse, and they built a lot of Tesla's equipment. And one of the things that they believed in was the hollow earth. And we had long discussions about this. And what was interesting to me is I had actually had an interest in geology in like seventh grade. And what he was describing, my father in law I'm talking about, was actually exactly what is being discovered or rediscovered today as far as the layers within the earth and there being an emitter, sort of a sun in the center of the earth. It's actually an iron cobalt nuclear reaction that's taken place where iron or cobalt's becoming iron or iron is becoming cobalt. And it provides both the magnetic field and heat of the earth. We don't have enough insulation to actually have the heat level that we have on the surface. So we have geothermal heating on the planet as well. But a lot of the Admiral Byrd stuff, it echoed fictional tales and I mean things that were actually like if you read some of Jules Verne's stuff in French, he would actually put footnotes that he would imagine these things. He would say, "This is where I got this idea from," and those made it into publication. So if you get an old Jules Verne book in the original French, it has all that stuff in there. Now, Land That Time Forgot, Land of the Lost. There was a whole series of like sub franchises after Verne's U.S. copyrights ran out that reinforced this back in the 30s and 40s. Hugo, what was his name? The guy who first started filming, did a bunch of films on this too, the silent films era. Now, I think that's where, in the 1970s, where this was put forward as an alternate story, I think that's where the source material came from. Like I said, philosophical etymology, looking back and trying to figure out where these ideas came from originally. One of the things is that we can make sounds that go all the way through the earth, and we don't have a hollow earth. So, that being the case, then it only takes one black crow or one white crow to make all crows not black. Now, as far as using these alternative a lot of the alternative documents and books and fiction that's been written was intended to make you suspend disbelief in order to become engrossed in the story. And then later, this ability to suspend disbelief was used against us. And it was used to keep things secret or to create fear, uncertainty, and doubt, or to create what's called a limited hangout, which is some of the information is true, some of it's false. So it creates a narrative that people have difficulty navigating.
Yeah. Can I say something? Bill Cooper, I remember listening to his Hour of the Time or whatever programs way back, and he talked about aliens, and then he said, well, maybe these aliens, that everything that he was learning about was going to be the next fear, factor coming at us, an alien invasion type thing. What do you think about that?
I love that you asked that. One of my favorite things was that I read John Nash's Normalized Equilibrium when I was a kid. He won the 1958, I think, was Nobel Peace Prize. for his mathematical determination of how people interact. This is called game theory today. And by 1967, Stanford Research Institute had actually published contradictory studies, clinical studies, in which they determined that collaboration and cooperation were the primary drivers in societal constructs. So, where John
Sounds like
Nash had
DARPA.
this,
Sounds like
yeah,
DARPA stuff to me.
yeah. No, it was pretty cool. So, that collaborative thing negated John Nash. Now, if you go back and you look at John Nash, who he was and how he thought, he was much like Phil, not Phil, but
Bill Cooper.
Cliff. What's the guy's
Oh,
name?
sorry.
The guy, the Woo guy, Cliff,
Cliff
Cliff
High.
High. Yeah. So a lot of the same mental aspects as Cliff High. He was a paranoid schizophrenic, and John Nash actually had the inability to see anybody trying to be altruistic or cooperative. He always thought they were just out looking for their own best interest. Now, why that comes forward and why that's pertinent is that in I'm going to lose the date, but I think it was around 1965. There was documents written called the Iron Mountain Report, what to do in the case of peace, and there were 6 options given in that document, and we've progressed over the time period since then. Our governmental structures have progressed us through each of those options. Now, the climate option was actually in there, the viral contagion, the endless wars, space exploration that Kennedy focused on is in this thing, all prior to it actually happening. And the last item, option 6, was the idea of creating this common goal for all people to have their own self-interest in an alien invasion. And from that document, that has been a driving force within our governmental control structures to eventually give us this deception of an alien invasion, just like the deception of climate crisis, or the deception of, oh, there's we've always been at war with Oceania. No, we're allies with Oceania and we're against Australia or whatever, right?
Yep.
This endless war concept. So all of these concepts are covered. And I might actually have that book. Let me take a look here on my desktop really quick. I think it's on my desktop. Iron Mountain Report. It's a good read for you. I'll put it up in the.
I'll have to look that one up.
Yeah, it's. You'll see now, like Google's got all this stuff about it being a false document and all this crap. No, it wasn't. The Iron Mountain Center is on the top of Swickley Heights in Pennsylvania, and it's a storage facility that during the 1950s it was used as a think tank location during the Cold War, and it's a for real deal. It's not a manufactured conspiracy theory crap that they always claim.
Well, I love to go to Pennsylvania to watch my wing sprint cars race, so maybe I'll have to look into that.
Yeah, you're going up on 21 over by what the 21 and 30 coming out of West Virginia.
30. Okay, I'm coming up 81. I go to Williams.
81. Yeah, the Turnpike.
Lincoln.
Yeah.
And Port Royal. Those are the 3.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I'm trying to think of the name of the track we used. It was a dirt track over by where it's at the end of the Pittsburgh International Airport. It's at the intersection 21 and 30. I'm trying to remember the name of the town there. If you come down through Niles.
No, I've never been up that far.
Never went up that far? Yeah.
No. About 2 hours away from me is about as far as I've traveled.
I lived in Ada, down on the border there.
Okay.
You know where Ada is? By Union City?
No.
Yeah. You know where Laurel Caverns is? You know where Laurel Caverns is?
Yes. Okay.
Yeah, at the bottom of the hill from Laurel Caverns.
Okay.
Yeah, so I know the area you're talking about there up in West Virginia. That's I went to school for 3 years I worked in Jones and Laughlin steel mill starting in 1976 to 1979. I was 14 and had to wait till I was 17 before I could go into the service. Said I worked in a steel mill and went to Cleveland State, so I used to drive those roads every day.
I'm the middle child of three, and the older brother and younger sister both graduated Virginia Tech. I was not that person. I was an auto technician most of my life, and now I'm a maintenance technician at a company called Logoplast. Our company makes bottles for Procter and Gamble. I take care of
Oh, cool.
automated guided vehicles and automated cranes. It's fun.
Yeah, very cool.
60 years
So
old.
you guys are still doing automation up there?
Yeah, the whole plant, the whole PG plant is totally automated. It's all run by computers.
Great. Yeah, it was my forte. I actually am pretty good at that. I still do it for different companies.
The funny part is I'm good at the mechanical stuff, but not the PLC stuff. But I'm learning it. I've been there almost 4 years. Getting better every day.
While I was still in the service, I have an odd service record. I was ghosted for 13 years. But while I was still in this,
like Lori Moore is.
Yeah.
If you know who I'm talking about.
Yeah, it's funny because she was out on West End. I know some of the people that she worked with. Yep. So it's pretty funny. I reached out to her, boat drinks kind of reach out, and she was frightened by me. So, no worries. I met up with Matthew, who was the section chief for North Africa about 2 weeks ago.
Oh, wow.
Went over, smoked a cigar at a cigar bar. It's a lot of the old guys are looking each other up now. It's kind of funny because we're the ones who survived.
Right. Yeah, I never got the vax. They tried to force everybody in our company to get the vax, and 30% of us were going to quit, and they decided, well, we have to let that go because it'll shut the plant down.
Yeah. No, it's amazing the total disregard for what we learned in World War II. It's actually amazing. Just I'm talking about the no forced experimental medical procedures and shit like that.
Oh yeah.
Nuremberg Code.
Right.
Yeah, we just totally abandoned that and start forcing people, right?
Well, the World Economic Forum, the cabal, as I call them.
Mm-hmm.
They've got their plan and their one world government plan.
Yeah, it's just the crazy ass thing is that it's the same group of people. It's literally the grandchildren of the people that we fought in World War II, and they rear their heads about every 70 years. You go back through time, you'll find them.
Yep.
And they all trace themselves back. Yeah, they trace themselves back. They think they all descend from Cain, that's a good possibility. I think there's a facial character that's uniform through them. I can see them. So.
Yeah, I didn't mean to get off the subject. I knew we were talking about Antarctica. Now we're
no worries, man. It's open, a totally open discussion.
Okay. Hey, I want to let somebody else get in here.
Yeah, sure. Go ahead. Anybody?
But thank you.
We got Vigilance is up there.
Thanks, Bob. We've got Jay, the initial J. Been waiting for quite a while.
Here.
Hey, Jay, what's up, buddy?
Hey, can you hear me, Dave?
Just barely. If you can, turn up your gain or get closer to the mic.
Yeah. I'm driving right now. I had to get on the road, but I wanted to make sure to jump on, say hi. Michael Ray Corey told me to connect with you. He told me to join tonight, and I've been listening in for about an hour or so since you were talking about the doors in Antarctica.
Yeah.
Going back to the topic, I read I guess it was the book Albert K. Bender, Antarctica and the UFO phenomena. I'm not sure if you're familiar with that book or not, but I remember him talking about how Operation High Jump and Admiral Byrd and the different operations down there, and he explained, I guess the atmosphere. I guess it was really the temperature of like the caves down there being like all the geothermal activity underneath the ice with the cold temperature above the ice kind of gets you a cool even 70 degrees in the middle where I believe life could flourish. I just wanted to
Yep.
get your insights on that, and is that a true statement?
Yeah, yeah, it actually is. That it's pretty cool. It's the one of the things that they're really concerned about back in the 80s when they started exploring some of these caverns down there was cross contamination because they considered Antarctica an isolated area and they were worried about bacteria that the rest of us hadn't been exposed to. And, that was one of the reasons why they ward people off for, basically 20 years. Um, was because they were worried about this cross contamination. You'll hear a lot about that with the lake at Vostok too. The water in the lake at Vostok is actually warm enough to support life, and a lot of the air in the caverns, in New Schwabenland, the Nazi bases made use of. They dug holes 450 foot deep, and the ground temperature down there was balmy. It was like 70 some degrees. So it warmed their entire facilities. Um, we had another expedition, an Arctic expedition that used nukes that was up on Greenland. And they ended up doing something similar with that too, using the geothermal. But yeah, that's actually true.
Yeah, in that book, the Near Schwaben, was part of that book. He represented it, I think, to very much how the people in power don't really want us to know about what's down there, right? And they like to project it with symbolism, right, in the media and culture. And he tied it to kind of like Superman in that cavern, like with the kryptonite, being very similar to what you just said about the bacteria.
Yeah, it's actually a big concern because, like even some of the cyanobacteria in deep, when we dig wells and such, there's rock-eating bacteria, there's oil-eating bacteria that's down deep. They call it cyanobacteria, and it's some pretty nasty stuff. Like the ocean stuff, they went around the vents out there in the Atlantic Ocean by the Mid-Atlantic Ridge, and some of the stuff that they brought up would eat through polyester. It would eat through, you know, glass. It was nasty stuff. One has a floric digestive system. It actually has fluorides in it that can eat through like rock. It's like amazing stuff. But yeah, that's probably another good reason why not everybody goes down there.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, really nice talking with you, and I'll be here to listen and hopefully have some more questions for you.
Great.
Thanks, Jay. Okay, next is Nimi. Hey, Nimi, how you doing?
Hey, Nimi, been a while.
Hi, Dave. Sorry, I was just in the washing my hands. Hey, it's been a while, Dave. Thank you so much for doing this call. My question
Hey,
is,
hold on, Nimi. Before you start, Dave, can you turn down your speakers or mute?
Oh, sure, hon. Yeah, I'm trying to shuffle.
okay. My question is, has anybody experimented with the rodent coil to generate electricity in their homes? That was something that Junvelo Melchizedek had worked with a math genius and a scientist to bring that out, but wasn't sure if anybody had heard about it.
Yeah, actually, we actually built a couple of them back, I want to say around 2016. Um, there's a lot of mythos surrounding it. I've heard people call it cold energy. Basically, it creates a very high frequency harmonic that's kind of interesting, and both the Rodin and the Bodini coils have anomalistic properties to them. We didn't have the funding to continue studies on it. It was sort of like a a quick, and then we moved on to plasma. We were actually working with a lot of plasma stuff at the time. So, but yeah, there's actually something there. It's pretty cool.
Yeah, and today I was listening to a talk by India's foreign minister and how India wants to take the lead on influencing world policy by looking back to all the kind of the ancient text and going with the ways of a spirituality, and how that could bring us to a better footing in how countries run their economic policies, their social policies, whatever those policies are. And so there's going to be, even at the World Economic Forum, some countries actually didn't really resonate with it. So not sure if anybody has any input on that. I know India wants to steer away from what they call like these not so much Western ideas, because some ideas just they're common within all societies, but they're realizing that some of the brainwashing that's being done at a high level is impacting every society just because media is primarily owned by the Western countries.
Absolutely. My introduction to Vedas was the seven rays of Shiva, and a guy actually showed me this in a steel mill. He was showing me how they were able to use the color, its spectral analysis, to determine what the steel mix was when they were making chromium steel. And in this Veda, one of the text, it actually lays out the seven rays of Shiva in the colors that are associated with each of the rays, and they were matching the spectral analysis of vanadium chromium steel production. Now, here's the issue with that, is that vanadium chromium steel wasn't discovered until 1974, and here it is in a text that's supposedly 1,400 years old. So that woke me up and said, hey, you need to read this stuff, because there's definitely information there that was translated in a religious way, but it's science that's actually laid out. So yeah, definitely I would love to see some of the newer Indian thought process, because they have a wealth of context. I mean, just a description, like, most famous is Oppenheimer's "Now I Have Become Death." Speaking of what was it, Shiva? No, it was Vishnu quoting after he dropped the Brahmistra. Yeah, yeah. And that was, if you read that, it's actually a description of an atomic blast. You go up to Mohenjo-Daro in Pakistan, north end of Pakistan, up by the Kush, and the ground's radioactive. The bones are radioactive. So, something happened there. Same thing with the Sindh Desert in India, the western part of India. There's a big desert there called the Sindh, and there's radioactive glass in the desert. So.
Yeah, and somebody had spoken about, when you're looking for an answer and you're just kind of contemplating. I've been hearing from this really interesting, very wise gentleman. It's unfortunately his videos are in Hindi, but what he says is that what we're doing is that we're connecting with everything through our body consciousness. He goes, when you are at your soul consciousness, when you're connected with your soul, that's when you're able to um, I guess, download this information. And what's happening is that we are so much in the nitty gritty of the body consciousness, looking good and doing the right thing for yourself and whatnot. I'm not saying this group is doing it, but just in general, that people are not living in soul consciousness, but all of the happenings are actually happening in soul consciousness. And what he's saying is that your mind actually resides in your soul. And there are three bodies. So there's the physical body, then there's the astral body, and then there is a causal body, which is what they call the Karan Sharira, that resides in your soul. Now, if your soul's power has been diminishing because you're wasting your energy and doing all these other crappy things, and things that don't value your life and what life is about, and you're not in your soul consciousness, what happens is that you're disconnected from the creator. And what he's saying is that when you're in your soul consciousness, you can actually connect with what he calls the Almighty Authority, the great creator who's created all the multiverses. Which and it's so weird because I've done courses on like the soul consciousness, but I was actually raised with it because my parents were meditators, and when I started doing his meditation, it was like by day 2 I was seeing an impact. I mean, I would literally say, "Oh my God, I can't take this meeting. I have too much on my calendar," and somebody would say, "Namisha, please let's reschedule because I can't make this meeting," or "I'm having trouble with my manager. I'm sending her good vibes." And cleaning out all of my stuff, like what have I been sending to her if I was upset with her? I'm sending upsetting thoughts to her. I cleaned out all of that. My relationship with her changed in a matter of 2 weeks. It was that fast. Because
What's wonderful, Nimi, is um, exactly what I'm trying to describe by using the word sound and the originator, the causal of the body of light. That's exactly what you're describing from a different, what would you call it, a tradition or a societal context. And I think as we realize this, no matter which direction we come in on, we're all looking at the exact same thing.
Yeah,
yes,
Navy,
totally agree.
I agree, and this is why I use the words like I know I say it constantly, but this is literally taking you out of the materialism mind frame that we are so that's so embedded, especially in Western thought. It's not about going, it's a consciousness shift, and for years and years, people it's been given this weird spin in the West, and it's turned into this weird new age bullshit, movement. But if you move all that aside and you really get to the core of what they're talking about in these older things, it's precisely what you're saying, and it's precisely what the what the wise ones of thousands of years ago, when I talk about connecting with the cosmos and they connected with the stars every night in the West. So that's how they did it. And so it's all words, and it's all trying to explain these etheric things with words that it's hard for a Western mind to wrap their mind around. And so when Dave talks about these things like with the Monroe Institute and all of these options and all of these light and sound therapies, they're all using what you're describing. But it's hard to put it in words and context that a lot of people in the modern era can understand, because it sounds like a bunch of woo woo bullshit.
Yeah, I think New Age came up as a controlled opposition. So it's like they could control it and give a good stir and mix of goddamn everything into it. So people get confused and they just start um, following stuff that's not really, it's not about grounded in reality. I think people are following stuff that's not part of their reality and they want it. And then the other thing somebody had talked about was the drugs. Now, I know people do ayahuasca and whatnot, but when you go to other explorations through psychedelics and all that, what happens is that you're actually opening up your psyche to entities coming in, and the entities can impact you. So we haven't even gone down that path. That there are so many entities living around us that are in the not in the visible space, but how these entities, like they'll say that if you go to a bar, you'll see all the entities who are desiring alcohol, and they kind of hang out in these places, and then you come out of that place feeling oh my gosh, I feel so crappy. Or even people carry entities in them, and you'll talk to them or they'll pass by, and you're like, oh my gosh, I feel like so weird. So we haven't even gone down that path yet, how
To-
entities impact us.
totally.
So
I mean,
for Christians, um, there was a guy named Malachi Martin. He was the exorcist that the movie Exorcist was created about. Malachi actually was on Art Bell a lot back in the mid 90s. And he came up with a statement that was perfect The interview and conversation was between Ed Dames, who was the Army's coordinate remote viewer trainer, and he said that the middle plateau is like dynamite for the soul, meaning that when you open yourself up out of context, which is what recreational use of DMT or recreational use of ayahuasca, ibogaine, or even psilocybins can do. So if you don't have the contextual basis behind it, you're in a ground where there is no protection. The veil, and this is a Christian tradition, that there was a veil put between us and those forces, those entities that are not of our conscious reality. That veil is lifted and their permission is no longer needed. So, like the old stories of the vampires needing permission to enter your home, well, that was a metaphor for the actual act of permitting something into yourself. Now, that whole concept that Malachi was talking about, he's absolutely correct. Enoch actually sat down and wrote down the names of 72 angels by the function that they did. And that book of angels is around. You can read it. Azuzel was the one who taught men to fashion weapons of war, and women to put on makeup, as just as a for instance. Now, he also spoke of principalities and towers and castles. And when we read Revelation in the Christian Bible, the Revelation uses words and phrases and concepts that were taken from the book of Enoch, and it references that at the beginning of Revelation. Now, if you can imagine this guy sitting down, having a big screen TV put in front of him, and watching everything on that TV, and trying to use his metaphorical context to communicate what he was seeing, then the book of Enoch actually looks very good, and Revelations looks very good. I mean, it makes sense. Now, I think the same thing happens in some of the Vedic Shastras, and I think of the Vedas in two ways. That you have the Vedas, which are a history, and then you have the Shastras that were, in my understanding, visionary, but yet very famous was N does not equal NP solution that was given in a Shastra back in the 50s. And this was a profound thing. This is the concept of the Tesseract. This is the concept of folding multidimensional space. And today I posted an announcement, which is actually 30 years old, that with, quote, quantum computers, they were able to generate an Einstein-Rosen bridge, a wormhole through space-time. Now, that technology actually goes back all the way back to about 1926. So just to give you an idea how much has been hidden from us. And, that part of it is kind of weird. But when we start playing with things like ayahuasca, I've experienced it. And what you're experiencing is the essence of life of the plant that originated the molecule. Now, DMT is different. DMT is very much crystalline if it's a synthetic DMT. The experience is geometric. It's not, there's no connectivity. In ayahuasca, everyone who's ever taken it is there. And there are icons. I think of them as like stereotypical mental archetypes that exist. There's little gnome-like things that'll carry you around, lead you around. There's old ones that are sitting at the outskirts of the experience, like on the periphery of the experience, and you can ask the old ones for information, and they'll actually tell you information. There's uh, the idea of hyperspace, like Cliff High talks about hyperspace a lot in the use of psilocybin. Um, Reaching that state where you become in sync is exactly what the gateway experience is. And DMT does increase in the brain when you're in sync. And meditation, different forms of meditation, will bring you into that sync that Monroe actually equated it to a physicality. He said that the reflection of the sound of your pulse returning to your heart was in sync with the following pulse. But it's more than that. There's actually physical changes that take place in your body. The I believe they're called parietal lobes. The little butterfly-looking thing in the center of your brain vibrates, and after the experience and after that vibration continues, and it becomes profound. So, and I'll actually post a video up on the thing there if I can find it real quick, up on the chat of MRI was done. I had a weird noise coming out of my head, and for real deal. I mean, it wasn't like tinnitus or auditory hallucination. You put a stethoscope up to my forehead, you could hear it, and they caught it on the MRI. So I kept that copy of the MRI, and I'll share it up on the text. But being in sync is a real thing, and there are physiological changes that take place as well as mental changes that take place.
Nimi, did you have anything else to say?
No, I'm good. Somebody else had their hand raised. I'm good for now. Thank you.
All right, so good to hear from you.
I think Vigilance was waiting.
Well, we've got one more in front of him, James.
Hey, buddy, how you doing tonight? Unmute, man.
Okay, well, let's go ahead and have Vigilance come on up.
So nice to see many of you after it's been a while. Dave, I really love the work. One question I would raise tonight is, so there's this overwhelming, not overwhelming, but underlying theory that I can see when I look across everything going on right now. And it's this theory of the pole shift. And the pole shift is presented in sort of the mainstream as the moving of the polar magnetic center. We have it shifting towards, I've seen everywhere from going over the Philippines to going over Greenland. And so you have this in the normal world, or in the, I guess, the general world, you have a theory that we're going to have the magnetic pole shift move. And when we get to a certain degree, it snaps, and then we kind of go from there. But the pole shift as a theory seems to encapsulate much of the ongoing world and the knowledge that a lot of us are privy to. We see it in the spiritual side. We see it in the energy side. Like I've even seen it articulated as we're going to go from energy within the earth. And I have to say, Dave, the potato earth theory, I want to run with that because I love that. I have potatoes are a big thing in my life. But this idea that we're going to see a pole shift, and in that pole shift, I mean, when we look at the history of the world, we look at the previous cataclysms, we look at what has happened in the past. This pole shift coming up, I don't really see it in the history. It seems to be a lot of repetition. We see like a scouring, we see cataclysms, we see the obscuring of information, but we don't see is a pole shift to illumination. And we're seeing a lot more information coming out now. And part of it I look at and say, okay, well, the people in charge are kind of being forced here because they're showing me things like the average person can pick up Telegram and find out what we can generally find out if you've spent enough time looking at it. So all this stuff is coming and coming and coming. But in relation to the earth and the realm that we live within, the giant donut potato that we live within, this pole shift of energy and this pole shift of how we perceive the world, I would really be very curious to not only yourself but the group is, what do, because what I see is I see that kind of golden age upon us, and I see the suffrage of what was. It's that transition, and I don't know what specifically it is, but the world is changing. And I would be very interested to see what your eyes see in the horizon.
This is so cool because Nimi, this is again in your wheelhouse too. Um, as a historical reference in traditions, the Hindu tradition has these cycles of time called yugas. And it just so happened that I believe it was August of last year, we ended the downward cycle of Kali Yuga and began the Dwapara Yuga ascending cycle. And coinciding for the last 14 years, we've had a magnetic polar progression going across the Earth. I actually have a document I'll post up on the chat as we were discussing this before. It's a pretty profound change. Now, as far as snap changes, when you look at mineralogy, there is evidence that there have been rapid changes in the past because you can have two layers of igneous rock from the same volcanic eruption that the crystals in the magnetite crystals in the igneous rock are aligned in different directions. So, and we're not talking random. I'm saying they're actually aligned as though the magnetic field of the Earth shifted in that quickly that it was in a single volcanic eruption. So that can be a period of a day or a period of months. But just posted the PDF up there. It's Pole Wander, and it actually shows that in 2020 it's just about even with the inner circle of the Arctic Ocean above Greenland. So it started out in 1900 down on the outer circle of the, I believe that's 30 degrees north latitude, and it's now up around 2 to 3 degrees north latitude. So the pole is actually moving. And I think it's pretty interesting that it would coincide with the period that the Vedas saw as a changing of times. Now, how does it affect people? I know that there's a direct effect on the path that electrons travel. And the reason I know that is back in the 70s, I was an avid TV guy. I would fix TVs, and people know about Greenbrier. Everybody at Greenbrier was a TV repairman. So one of the things that, if you look on the back of an old CRT tube, even a monitor for a computer, there are these rings of weak magnets that are used to align the electron beam according to your location and latitude. So it used to be a common thing when somebody got a new TV set, the guy would come out and he would set it up and he would tune your color in so it was nice and crisp. Now, the reason why we were tuning it in is the Earth's magnetic field actually affected something as mundane as the electrons flowing from the emitter to the screen, the phosphor screen on a CRT. So does it actually affect us directly? I could say that, yeah, it's probably a subtle energy effect. And when we have a high wobble like that, again, back to my sound, which is pretty funny. It's like full circle stuff. But if you have that high diversion, it's going to be that sound being, this is a 7.8 hertz Schumann cavity resonance in the magnetic field of the Earth that we have. That sound's going to be a dominant sound. And it will cause, when it's that far out of whack, it can be discordant. And as it gets, the amplitude of it becomes lower and lower, it allows the amplitude of the originating sound to become greater. So your signal to noise ratio changes. So I think that's actually what might be happening and why we're having both the, I think there's a couple things happening as far as our emergence. One is that we have what's called a societal isostasis, in that tyranny creates a reaction from people towards freedom, towards personal determination. And that aspect of it, plus the fact that we are connected in Rupert Sheldrake's term, biomorphic field, or some people call it the 100th monkey effect or morphic resonance. We all kind of have a common feeling. Like you can feel people, like Nimi was saying, people who are have attachments that you can feel them when you walk past them. You can feel somebody stare at you from across the room. We have this connectivity. Now, in the past 2 years, 3 years, there's been a profound sense of fear, a profound sense of loss, a profound sense of anger, disappointment, heartache, and it's atmospheric. In other words, it's not specific to any experience you're having, but it's in the general surrounding. And this is heightening our awareness of these feelings, because those feelings are more profound because we have a larger number of people having those feelings. The second part of it is that the background noise is decreasing. Anybody knows about what a sinusoidal waveform is? It's a vector rotating around a circle, and the amplitude is the distance from the circle of the vector. So if you think of the magnetic pole rotating around the geographic rotation of the Earth, that wobble in the magnetic field is going to be louder in 1900 than it is today. So that electromagnetic sound that was discordant is becoming less. So we're both becoming more aware of this connectivity, and at the same time, the strength of signal of the connectivity is increasing. So very cool. And I think I see an emergence where we may become aware of the outcome of our intent and how it affects everyone else. And in concert, be able to vanquish even the concept of evil. Kind of a high, lofty idea, but why not? I mean, think about it. If we all got our morphic fields in resonance, we could blast away the discordant. It would overwhelm it, just by our being. Which is a very cool idea. Yeah.
Dave,
go ahead.
The skin, from what I understand, the dermis, the epidermis, the subdermal skin, and all that's your 3 layers of skin, or whatever it is, that provides the standard human being with a level of protection against electronic EMF radiation. Apologies, pronunciation, but I understand it that the standard human skin, if you have good skin and it maintains its moisture, that it actually protects us to some degree from the radiation and the frequency in the world. And I wonder, like I think I showed you in the past, I had a theory that autism, high functioning autism was a reaction to the mind control, that people evolved out of being tricked by all the imagery and the mind screwery. But the idea that could the body have evolved over the resets, over frequency manipulation? The theories go back that we've been under control for 6,000 years, for 105,000 years, for millennia. Like it goes on and on and on. But could humans have evolved naturally to break out of the situation of control and the situation of imprisonment? And that is when we then look at some of the other topics we've touched tonight with like the vaccines, where you can't penetrate the human from the exterior because the God spark or the creator spark within, combined with the machine that is the human, which is an amazing machine, and the dermal, the skin, and everything that it can do to protect us, is the only way then. I know I'm kind of going off topic here, but is the only way then to infiltrate humans is to take the human on from within. And that's where we have this projected materialistic world that challenges us from the outside. But then you really see the core of what a lot of us are talking about today, and even with the earth, is what is inside us. So it's like, what have we evolved to counteract? And as we, again, back to the pole shift theory and the precipice, is there a point, and even these conversations that we're having, like the conversations that we had 6 months ago to a year ago to 2 years ago, and from a spiritual sense, from a community sense, I mean, there's a lot of people in here that have been around, and we've shared ideas. But are we just evolving to break our imprisonment? And is this just kind of the natural progression where now the evolution of mankind has broken the precipice and we're just about to hit that waterfall moment?
Yeah, I think we are, and um, adaptation over evolution. I do believe that we were created, and when I say that, I believe that the intent of our being was absolute. In other words, not that some alien changed our DNA or something like that, but I think that the concept of what we are was a creation of an almighty, pan-dimensional, pan-galactic, pan-universal being or intelligence. Now, however we get to that point where we believe that, or how, whatever our societal or whatever creates the narrative or the context that we view that in, I think it's still an underlying fact that something had to construct something this complex. Now, the other part of it is that, yeah, I was talking about societal isostasis. This is the actual tendency. It's kind of like on the same lines as concepts of Overton window, where group mind shifts in their political beliefs or their narrative belief. We actually, anytime that we've been put under stress, emergence takes place, and we look at heroes of old, like in Scotland. What was it? Somebody, the Bruce, the Braveheart guy. Is a good. What was it?
Robert the Bruce.
Yeah, Robert the Bruce, was it? Heroes emerge because they break through the overwhelming pressure of tyranny, or call it evil intent. And I think the entire society is moving to a point where a large number, and I'm saying that not everyone will break through, but I think a large number are feeling themselves almost at the point where they're breaking through. And the remote viewers back in the 70s and 80s had a point in the future that they couldn't view past. And you hear the Weffers talk about the singularity and the movement of the singularity. Um, I think that flashpoint, Ed Dames saw it as Doctor Doom saw it as a solar flash that would wipe out all life on Earth. I don't think that's what it is. I think looking forward, there is a point that you can't see beyond, and it floods in like a brilliant light is the best way to describe it. And I'm talking about in the middle plateau when you're doing things like remote viewing, when you look forward. Um, I think that flash is actually the energy coming off from mankind coming into harmony and our literal biophotonic fields emitting light through space time in a way that is indescribable in modern context because we haven't experienced that in the past. Now, I keep thinking in my mind of the chains on the temples in India with the quartz crystals at the end of them. And there was a period of time in which those quartz crystals were lit. Those were actually like street lights on the temple. And I know how that can take place. I know the energy levels necessary to cause that. And I think we're going to get there. I think we're actually, as a society, um, going to emerge into the next step. And you can call it an evolutionary step if that's, if that uh, is contextually safer for, thought process. But yeah, I see us actually coming out of this in a in a crescendo that's going to be absolutely amazing. And I think that's why every one of us have chosen to be here.
Well, I think that's something that just how you ended it there. We all chosen to be here. I find that the souls and the people in this community and these communities, like within this group and with the groups with and the other groups that we also all participate in, like people are searching for information. People are searching out what is going on. And what I find very interesting, and I said this before, is that the information that we are learning and the way of the planet and the way of energy and the truth of the realm and what was hid from us, it is absolutely being brought forth by people who have experienced things. I mean, your wisdom in the life that you have lived, or I always love to listen. And I always learn when I listen to you, Dave. But there are so many people um, now they're learning things, and it's coming on mass. Like the amount of information is almost at breakneck speed, and this in several I would say overarching themes is this idea of disclosures. The truth is coming and nothing can stop this, and this we're all going here together. And I do feel that this, even disconnected from those groups in terms of some of their overall ideology, but it's like I do feel that we are all on this path. And I go back to that pole shift idea, is that we are going to see an inversion in our lifetime here. And that inversion, it's going to be an adventure. It's going to challenge all of us individually. There are going to be challenges. They're going to be geopolitical. They're going to be economic challenges. But largely, I really think it comes down to spiritual, and where we all end up arriving at in these days ahead. um you see one of the overarching themes is love and acceptance, love and tolerance, love and balance. Like I think what we are going to learn in these days ahead, we think we have an idea. I don't think we know. I think even I like to think that I know what's going on. I think that I'm an idiot compared to what will come in the days ahead. And I remain humble in that, because every single week I meet people, like people in this group, people who are in this chat, yourself, this work, every week is something phenomenally amazing, and it is contrasted by something horrible in the kind of regular world. So this detachment of the two realms, like it's coming. Like I can see that.
Yeah, I see that too. That's why I'm trying to describe it as like an emergence, like a brilliant flash of light. Um, it's what's interesting is that I never considered myself having a special life. I look back and I actually have to laugh about it because it's mostly been getting by and fuddling, just muddling through life. But I realize that I'm here and I've asked to be here a lot. Trust me, I've been the flat line a lot. And when I say a lot, I can count at least 17 times, and not because of the Q thing, but that at least 17 times that my heart has stopped. And in each instance, it was bliss and a feeling like being held in somebody's hands, like a newborn baby. And yet I asked to come back to be here, to finish whatever it was I was supposed to do. And I think all of us have had instances. I talk to a lot of people, and I always ask the question, has there ever been a time when you said, help me get through this one, I'll get through the next one myself, even if it's getting drunk? It's something that happens a lot with people, that overdrink. They get the spins and, oh, help me get through this one and I'll get through the next one myself. That kind of a request, I think, is a deeper, profound thing that if you think of the fellow, your people around you, that everybody asked to be here. Either before they were born, they may even not know it, but everyone asked to be here. That means it's voluntary. It's not something forced upon us. Now, the evil that we have in this world is so profoundly intense. It's not just in your face, but it's every stone you overturn, okay, you find there's an evil thing there. And I think that the concept of isostasis is that in a balance you have the yin and yang, the negative and the positive, and as energy increases in a system, both the negative and the positive energy increases in the system. So it's a balance of the system. Now, I think the emergence is the breaking of that system. In other words, the concept that a single light, a single match in the darkness eliminates darkness. Darkness doesn't have the ability to snuff out light. And that aspect of it is, very hopeful in concepts. But yeah, I see us emerging into something truly profound. And I also see those who have based their authority. I have a difference between power and authority. Authority is an absolute knowledge of something. You become an authority at your own opinion. You become an authority of how to print 3D files. Excuse me. You become an authority at whatever your specialty is. Now, if information comes into that specialty that changes your authority, a wise person will absorb that new information and incorporate it into their mindset. Now, the difference is that when somebody creates a false authority and uses that for power in order to manipulate and control, they have to fight with more energy to maintain that authority. In other words, that false authority. And I noticed just in regional differences in education, the blurring of the meaning of both the words authority and power. You have in the north, north of the United States, you have people who will say the authorities, okay? When speaking of political or policing action, it's the authorities. And I don't see that. I don't see them being authorities. I see them being in power. And there's a big difference between the two. Now, in academia, the force of academia is solely the concept of authoritative context. Now, as that authority wanes, as we become more aware and self aware, the control is actually more and more difficult to contain. And Cliff High said something recently. He was talking about this concept of isostasis, that we've already broken through the point at which they can muster enough energy to overcome the emergence of us becoming aware. And no matter what they do, even if they killed us all, it still would not prevent what's coming. And I am very positive about what's coming. There's going to be some negative shit. And we're probably going to lose about 2 billion people on Earth on what has been done already. Now, along with that, we'll have a special, and this is something that I'm waiting for, and I know they're the ones who were injected will have difficulty having children, but I think that was part of their intent in adding in the fetal cells into the injections, was to create the antibodies for placental growth. And but beyond that, I think we're going to have a period in which we have like a baby boom that we saw at the end of World War II, where our species actually was, and not just here in the United States or in Europe, but globally, our species had the drive to have more children. And I think we'll see that again, not only with the societal emergence, the spiritual emergence, but actually the number of people on Earth. And I agree with Elon Musk that we're nowhere near the number of people necessary to colonize other planets. The carrying capacity of the Earth at the peak of World War II, we only hit 1.4% of the non-renewable resource of the Earth. Currently, we have entire areas of the planet that are unoccupied. Here in Florida, it's like something like 68% of our land mass is unoccupied. We have 33 million people down here now, and it's still 68% unoccupied. You take a look east of the Rocky Mountains, we have vast tracts of land that the population is, like less than 1% of the total population of the United States. And India, same thing. Even with billions of people there, you still have areas that are absolutely barren. And same with China. China had 1.4 billion people, and the north end of China along the Mongolian border is unoccupied. So I see us becoming more fruitful as far as multiplying more. And I also see us becoming more cognate of what our role in the big scheme of things actually is. Now, are we going to see drastic efforts to curtail that? Absolutely. But we have to remember, too, that the evil or darkness that we see are driven by two things. One is fear, and that's the predominant, and the other is avarice. They can never be satiated. So you take somebody like Bill Gates or Carl Schwab, right? Charles Schwab. These guys could have anything or do anything that they would possibly want to do, but instead they need more. They need more, they need more, they need more. Well, that's avarice. And yet, the majority of people even on this call tonight, we live modestly. We don't have that avarice, but we have a lust and a drive to actually explore and learn more and do more, create more. Anybody have any more questions? Yeah, I'll go ahead, Bud.
Yeah, so it's like you've got in the mainstream, you've got the Great Reset. In the alternative media, you've got the Great Awakening. I almost call it the Great Lesson because I share your perspective that we are going to lose a lot of things that we um, like a lot of things we've depended upon from a technology, from a societal structural sense. We're going to lose those things because I don't see the foretold destruction of society, Mad Max, where it's like Hunger Games. It's as much as people have been manipulated and engineered to kind of go into that disposition. I just don't think we arrive there when we're actually faced with hardship, and that may be ignorant of me, but that's what I see. But what I do think we are experiencing here is the great lesson, and I'll speak specifically to the jabs in this situation. And then I mean, you got so much going on right now. Like I won't go into any further, but we've got this lesson that we're learning, and there's all this disclosure coming out now. But what we're really learning as a world population, because again, Telegram and even now it's getting onto Twitter. It's worldwide. Like people are kind of, we're all figuring it out at the same time, and I can hope for a peaceful resolution to all this. But at the other end of it, it will be better. It's just that gnarly path between here and now, or now and then.
Well, it's been my goal since early 2000s to try to create a bridge. Um, not a Marxist, socialist bridge over, the fall of capitalism type thing, but we've become societally reliant on the control systems, um, and yet people are unaware that they've even been conditioned for that. Now, the collapse, I think we can do away with um, having a collapse situation because all of us still have the need for things and we still have the ability to create things. What we lack is a common ledger and an agreed upon um, trade system. When we look at this, we've been living under an extractive system for so long that even the guys, oh, real money is gold and you got to stack gold, but they don't realize that 8th century, the king of England declared all gold on earth his property, and that all bullion is hallmark bullion under the London Bank of London Bullion Exchange. It's king's property. So you're stacking gold thinking you're getting out of the system, and you're not, because the value of gold is assigned by a third party. It's third party evaluation. Now, personally, if you, I'll give you a perfect example. I'm trading, teaching a kid for his labor. So I don't pay him to work on my stuff. He pressure cleaned my sidewalks and driveway the other day. And in exchange, I'm giving him due consideration in teaching him a trade that he'll be able to carry with him the rest of his life. Now, this is the type of equitable exchange that every person in the world actually does, but we've been tricked into focusing on a third-party evaluation of our labor, a third-party evaluation of the value of something to us. We were tricked with words like fair market value. We're tricked with words like fair trade. What we actually, even the word equity, this recent emergence of Marxist equity is that everybody gets to the same place at the same time, no matter what. That's not equity. Equity is what would you, let's say for a meal, what would you do for a meal? What is your equitable trade for a meal? Just base it on that. There is actually a financial instrument that's called the Big Mac Index. and it's used to determine different currencies' relative values. So one of the companies that uses this is Apple Computing. If you look at their product sales in foreign countries, a lot of times the equitable value of their pricing is uniform. Like an iPhone cost in meals the same in the United States as it costs in India or in China, but yet the cost of those meals is radically different than what the cost of the meal is here in the United States. So even when we paid people, I had a company over in Pakistan that supplied internet to Bagram. It was called Frontier Telecom. I was the CRDO of Frontier. Um, when I got there, we were paying people $15 a month. Okay, and I'm like, how the hell? That's slavery. That's just ridiculous, right? Because how the hell can somebody survive? So what we did was we took a standard that just so happens to be in Peshawar. There's a Kentucky Fried Chicken and a family meal deal for four, which is 2 pieces of chicken for each person. So 8 pieces of chicken and 4 sides for 4 people. Was about 29 rupee. Now, at the time, rupees were, I think at that time, like 2,000 to the dollar. It was like ridiculous. So the amount of money that we paid people was commensurate so that a person who worked a day could feed his family for a week. So we were up in the upper echelon of what we paid people. And yet, compared to U.S. payroll, it was ridiculously little. Now, getting away from the idea of third-party evaluation is one of the big things that we must do as a society. Right now, when you go to look for a car, most people will go and try to see what the loan they can get is first, okay? Or what finance deals, not what the features of the car are or what their desire or needs are, but how much they can afford. You go to the grocery store, you have a dollar amount that you're willing to spend for the groceries for the week. Not considering what you actually need, but curtailing that by what some third party has determined the value is. And we need to get away from that. And as we get away from that, I think we'll develop these third party or independent systems of trade. And that's a huge part of the awakening is that we need to get away from the control systems. We need to circumvent every one of these control systems. So if you see something like your town council decides that they're going to fine you for having a chicken in your backyard, and we go along with that, why the hell are we going along with that? We need to stop. We need to stop obeying their authority, and we need to find alternative paths and circumvention.
That's the thing. And I'll finish my comments for the night out on that one. Saying no. So zero, the concept of zero, I think in mathematics came about, I don't know, 200 years ago or something like that. But no doesn't exist in nature. Like you can't, if a plant is growing, you can't tell it no. I mean, you can rip it out of the ground, throw it, onto some concrete and be like, you know what, screw you. But that plant will still grow, even though we won't be able to tell it'll grow until it runs out of life force. So the idea of no and the tenacity or the stubbornness, the stamina, whatever word you want to throw on it, but no is something that's been introduced to us in the last 200-300 years. Like again, the concept of zero, but just the idea of saying no from a consent basis. It seems that is one of the overarching lessons of everything we've seen in the last 2-3 years. Just say no.
Yeah, and actually, this is again, who can be a greater authority of your own mind and your own opinion than yourself? Why do we ask for permission? We've been conditioned to ask for permission. In the majority of times, people asking for permission are presented with constriction that prevents them from acting. And if you fail to ask for permission, and it is a violation of someone else, then there's something called apology. And an apology isn't saying you're sorry, it's justifying your actions. Look it up. That's actually another little word that's been, you know, warped in the past 20 years. An apology isn't saying you're sorry. An apology is justifying your actions. So when we think of these things, these are like, holy crap, how the hell can they bend that? But they did. So as we become more clear and more aware of our interactions and our intent and our own authority, like growing a plant yourself, right? A lot of people go and they'll look for permits to do something in their own on their own property, right? Well, that opens up the door for someone else's authority. If you just go ahead and do it and somebody comes along, you have a viable reason and justification, then you're without fault. They are with fault. And that's much easier to deal with than dealing with rejection or the no, like you're saying.
Awesome. Thank you so much.
You know, that speaks to an aspect of my life is I can actually say I've never asked for permission. I've never asked for permission, and you know, I've got to do some pretty freaking cool things just simply because I just went ahead and did them. You know, I didn't ask, well, you know, who do I need to get permission from to do something? I just did them, and I think, you know, I talk to a lot of young people too, and I'm stunned by. Well, here I'll do a different way of explaining the metaphor. When I was in Peru, one of the things that actually hit me dead on was the Spanish conquistador created the circumstance that conquered the people of Peru. Now, not only did they conquer the people, but they interbred with the people, much like the same way that the Khazarians did with the Kazakhs in Ukraine in 1917, 1919, where the enemy is part of your lineage. So you become self-loathing because of that, and that's part of a control structure. So in Peru, even though the descendants of the Inca and the Amara and the Chachapoya, and even though they were their unique social groups and their unique genetic lines, the Shuar up in the north end, the Shuar are the people with the red heads, they all had this interbreeding with Spanish. And even though they hated the way that the Spanish treated them, they themselves were Spanish, and it allowed Peru to be conquered. And you really saw it in the people and the way that people interacted. Now, recently, just in the past couple of months, I think there's a major breakthrough. I'm seeing massive protests in Peru that historically haven't been. You saw them in Chile, you know, back in the 70s against Piaget. But in Peru, it was never like that. Even when Fujimori stole $25 billion from the country, left the country broke, the people were not, you know, out in the streets protesting. Now they are. And I think that's a huge change, that they've gotten over that self-control, that self-oppression that was inherent. And I see this, the same technique was used in the 1800s and the 1900s, and it's a drastic societal difference between island folk. My visits to St. Thomas and dealing with the Lockharts of St. Thomas, which were black Scottish that bought their way out of slavery in 1848. They never had a racial undertow or there's not a racial conflict there. You have a conflict between continentals and islanders, in that the Continentals are socially liberal, fiscally conservative, and the Islanders are socially conservative and fiscally liberal. But the black-white thing doesn't exist in the islands. Same with Haiti. Same with Dominica. The same with St. Croix, St. John. It's just not there. Now you come up north here to United States, and we have this forced dichotomy. And in my town, we have a very special black community. They call it the Heart of Boynton, and they had Heritage Fest a few years ago, and I was working with a lot of the people in our town. The guy who invented uh, uh, mobile refrigeration on train cars is one of the original founders of our town. The Dewey family was a mixed race couple that founded Boynton Beach back in the 1920s. And in the 1930s, the Japanese, Yamato, had large pineapple and tomato and pepper farms, strawberries, that were shipped to New York and to Connecticut on the rail lines. And where AmeriGas is in town today is where the ammonia refilling system was set up for the first refrigeration. Well, that was all black owned. That was not. It was black businessmen who constructed that section of town. But yet, in the Heritage Fest, the people were celebrating the guy who invented the pay toilet, the guy who invented the push lawn mower. These were items of servitude, not something that was industrially significant, like Dennis, the guy who created the language called Logo that's used in Flash. That's the basis of Shockwave Flash is Logo. He lives in town, and yet they didn't recognize that. They recognized items of servitude, items of self-oppression. And I think in the United States, we see that a lot. Most people are unaware of the Garvinites, for instance, or Black Wall Street, or the race riots of 1917 Chester, Pennsylvania, or the catastrophe of East Tulsa, Oklahoma. And I'm a white guy talking about this, right? But yet, the average person has no clue that these things ever happened. They don't know that Africa was a fully functioning, on par civilization with Western Europe. They don't know that. This is a hidden history. And I think people becoming aware of our actual true history, the fact that we're all survivors, that we have been dwarfed by our atmospheric environmental conditions, and that our distinctions are celebratory, not diminutive. We look around the world, and I know for a fact that guys in Pakistan can do math hell of a lot better than I can, and guys in Asia can do math hell of a lot better than I can. And it's just inherent in the people. And I think we need to actually celebrate those things instead of trying to create this hodgepodge of grayness.
All right. Thank you very much, Vigilance. Great conversation. Tracy is next, and then I think Mimi wanted to say something else before we start to try and wrap it up.
Hi, Dave. Can you hear me?
Sure can. How you doing, Tracy?
I'm great. Thank you so much for this call. I have to say it's much easier to understand your experience and your knowledge than on Telegram. I have a hard time.
Let me interrupt you guys real quick. Dave, can you mute while she talks, please?
Thank you.
Yeah, sorry, I forgot.
It's hard to speak when you hear yourself echoing all the time. So I just wanted to thank you for this because I find you're just an incredible teacher and educator, and I do have trouble sometimes following along with your posts. And so this has been really, really helpful. And I've been listening since almost the beginning, and I had written down some questions, and now I'm not even sure which direction to go because there's just such fascinating conversation. But if I could ask you a little bit about what you touched on with some of the healing devices, the light and sound, I think ultra slim and multispectral. I've been studying and experiencing different energy medicines, and it's a real passion of mine. And I come from a background in physical therapy, working with people, and always known that healing shouldn't be this difficult or this lengthy. And I would really love to just, if you wouldn't mind commenting a bit more, maybe on what you've experienced or what you know about frequency devices. And um, there's a lot out there that is, in this day and age of a lot of deception, manipulation, and greed, it's hard to know what is out there that's really of a value and that works and is a good, um, I guess, investment, a good something that would maybe be sustain the length of time with working with people and that could really make a difference in people's lives. If you wouldn't mind touching on some of your experience with that. And the spiritual piece is fascinating to me too, but I think I would get so overwhelmed with asking some questions around that. So I'm just going to stick to the energy medicine frequency piece because that's a real fascination for me. So whatever you would like to share on that, I'd be most grateful.
Great. I'll do a little bit of a dive here. So when I was a little kid, my mom had difficulty delivering me. So my nerve on my left side was pinched in my arm, and I had a spastic arm. They used to have to sew my shirt sleeve to my chest, or it would flail around by itself. And I started. They tried to force me to learn to play guitar, thinking that would help. Having the concentration on the hand movement. I carried a guitar around for a year and couldn't play bag. Um, then they got the idea of sending me over for Taekwondo lessons. And I happened to meet a guy named Tungshung Parks, who was the Grandmaster of World Taekwondo, and studied under him for 3 years. And part of what he trained us was on techniques for self-healing. And I've come to, through studying since then, I became able to heal very rapidly using the techniques of intent. Literally, the first part is removing the concept of there being an injury there, and replacing it with the intent to allow cells to grow. And that was the mystic part of it from ki energy or chi energy in the Taekwondo methodology. But later on, I discovered that during cellular mitosis, which is the division of cells, heat, chemical energy, electrical energy all add to the total energy of the cell. And usually intent is what tips it over. Now, a couple things happen in the process of injury. If you watch yourself on a laceration, if you have a cut on your hand or whatever, and you watch it, before it bleeds, the first thing it does is clamp the capillaries shut. So you have an open gap with no bleeding yet. Then you get a little bit of inflammation, and the capillaries open up. The next stage is that you have full flow of blood flow, and pain begins. Now you have the sense of touch, a little inflammation, and then pain in succession. Now, what those things do is the first thing, the capillaries blocking off is preservational. It actually stops the flow of blood. The little bit of inflammation comes with a histamine response that also triggers T cell production in your lymph nodes, and you get a rush of platelets and lymphatic tissue that flows into the wound area with the blood. And this is what causes the scabbing and the initial stage of healing. Now, in that process there, generating that irritation that triggers the T cell and the stem cell production can be replicated in your body through specific types of irritants. Now, when I was doing my stuff, I'm kind of an extremist on things, so I was using sulfamethasone. 5 days of 1,500 milligram a day. I would go into global inflammation, and then for the next 30 days, I would use the imaging effect to create the high and low pressure zones that the stem cells would coagulate or coalesce in. Now, what triggers mitosis is this peak of energy. Now, if the body is is diseased, it's out of harmony, then you have to overcome that negative sound. And I'm going to use sound because it's a multi-frequency, multi-spectral energy. You have to overcome that in order for the mitosis to take place. Now, when you use things like ozone, for instance, I had a nerve exposed to my face, and I just recently blew out 2 discs in my back, C5-6 and C6-7, and for 7 weeks I had the doc inject ozone into the spine to generate the inflammation necessary to trigger the stem cell production, to trigger the healing. Now, you can also do that with sound, with actual audit. When I say sound, it's ultrasonic, but at 419 kilohertz, you can pulsate the tissue, and it'll generate that inflammation that triggers the T cell and the stem cell production. The 635 nanometer light, when it's pulsed, penetrates in about 2 centimeters in. So you're not going to get like an abdominal issue with MLS systems, but you will foot, leg, knee, back, arm, typical areas of injury. It is beneficial. Now, whole body med bed type stuff. I had quite a bit of money when I first got injured, and if there was a med bed, I would have been able to afford it. Okay, there wasn't. So this mythos that there's med bed technology out there that's secret, no. I had somebody actually trying to sell me a kidney, so on demand. So there on the upper end there is technologies and stuff available, but med bed wasn't one of them. Now, what a lot of people are doing. There's the philosopher's chair, and there are these Christopher Key's medbed type devices. That what they're doing is they're sending sound through the body to entrain the body to continue to vibrate in resonance with this external energetic sound that comes in. And what this does is this increases the amount of energy available at the cellular level for cellular mitosis, just as the MLS laser does, or the ozone creates the circumstance where your body has the inflammation that actually triggers the production. So all of these technologies are a cusp. They're not they're FDA approved because they show benefit and they are legitimate. They actually do work. But are they widely accepted by academic science? No, because it cancels out the authority of academia. Now, I think what we'll see here in coming years is less reliance on the structures that were placed in front of us. If you look at AMA medical treatment or standard of care as in the ICD billing codes, that whole system was constructed as a way to sell additional petroleum products in place of natural medicines. One of my favorites is I've been irradiated, so I'm 300 clicks per minute radioactive all the time. And one of the concerns I've had is glioblastoma and sarcoma growth. So around about November 2021, there was a white paper written where they discovered that certain enzymes and bioflavonoids cause metastatic cancers, metastasis in the body. So the C38 enzyme is responsible for metastatic cancer growth, and L-arginine creates the vascular growth. So C38, the primary bioavailable bioflavonoid that actually inhibits C38 production is granatine. The most abundant source of granatine in nature is pomegranate juice. So I drink 4 quarts of pomegranate juice every week. Concentrate, it's 40 times concentrate. So it's actually whatever, 16 quarts, 160 quarts or whatever is what it works out to a regular juice. But that increases the granatine in my body. And I can say for the last 2 years, I have not had to have a single sarcoma removed. Now, energetic healing has a similar place. We can look at the mechanism of the body and understand that the mechanism is actually an expression of our energetic field. Now, where Rupert Murdoch talked about the societal biomorphic field or morphic resonance, biophotonics and bioquantum body is state-of-the-art medicine now. So we can actually image with ultraspectral imaging your entire body. And using that base sound that's coming in, we can determine whether cells are in harmony with that sound or discordant. So recent University of Miami, this is mainstream science, there's a device called a Lemcell Icon Gamma Knife, in which what they do is originally this device was used to simply burn away cancer cells, and it had a wide margin. So they intersected gamma ray radio transmission into the body and heated up the body and burned out tumors. What they've been doing recently is actually recording the sound of cancer cells and duplicating by what's called a fringe effect. If you have 2 transmitters that are slightly out of phase, like binaural, sound in both ears, the phase difference and the difference in frequency you'll hear is a different tone in the center of your head. That type of biophotonics is used to reflect the sound of the cancer cell back into the cell, causing it to overheat and die. And that's mainstream science today, and that's actually being done today. So where energetic healing used to be mythos, and it was using New Age concepts and concepts from Hindu literature, with the concept of prana and the concept of what was the other? There's another concept in Hinduism of the chakras, of balancing the chakras. These were expressions of a technology that was known that now is being rediscovered. So I see a potential way of creating something similar to a biobed. And this is one of my project things that I've been kind of working on. I'm going to buy an MRI machine. And I haven't found anybody to sponsor the helium in it yet, so we're going to try using argon. Helium's just way too expensive. It's like $450,000 to fill the machine with the helium. We can do it with argon for about $10,000, $15,000 to keep it cool. And using the primary impulse of an MRI machine to entrain the body. In other words, go ahead and read the body's sound and bring it back into harmony with this external sound, so that any discordance in the body is overcome, reversing disease process. But all of it's theoretical right now, so it's going to require a lot of experimentation. But yeah, it's something we got for the future. Definitely, medbeds can definitely be a real thing in the foreseeable future.
Thank you so much, Dave. That was wonderful. And that really resonated with me when you talked about intent, because I would talk to my clients about talking to their body and talking to their cells. And uh, as we all know, that emotions and life stressors factor into people's pain, and the body interprets that and holds on to that and responds to that. So I think that is so very important. And I know Dr. Joe Dispenza, I think, has done a lot of work along that and how he healed himself of spinal fractures. So I agree with you wholeheartedly there that how we talk to our body and send those loving vibrations into our body can be the most powerful method of healing. So thank you so much for sharing that. And I look forward to learning more from you, because this is a real passion of mine, and I really want to get involved with energy healing for the future with some of these, well, old technologies that are going to be new technologies to people who maybe aren't in tune with that, and still along with Western medicine and doctors and pharmaceuticals. So thank you so much for your input. And I know it's getting late, and I really appreciate your time and education.
Oh, you're most welcome. That's, I said once to Ryan Broken Anthem, I said, that's why I'm here.
Thank you so much, Tracy. Mimi, we'll wrap up with you if you had some last comments or questions.
If you want to wrap up, that's okay. I can always catch on next week.
Hit me. I'm still good, hon.
Yeah,
We
go,
good.
go, go, Mimi.
Okay, so
Let's take it out to the top of the hour.
okay, sounds good. So, Dave, when you were talking about permission, how we ask for permission, I wanted to understand, when we ask for permission, we're actually asking for permission from the matrix, and the matrix is giving feedback, because in a way, we're not really, because the matrix is an artificial construct, my understanding is that we're asking for permission from an artificial negative construct, and therefore permission isn't really granted. And then the next comment was, there was a wonderful lady by the name of Catherine Eiserbeit, and she was, I believe, Secretary of Education or Assistant Secretary of Education many, many years ago, probably in the 1960s and 70s. And she was totally against this whole mind control of the kids. I mean, when we look at the school system, raising your hand when you want to speak, and going to school at a certain time and leaving at a certain time, they actually wanted to create a bunch of factory workers, actually. They didn't want to create intellectuals. That's what they wanted to do.
Yep, that was Charlotte Iserbit Johnson. She was the daughter of Lyndon Johnson, and she served as Secretary of Education under Ronald Reagan. And she found a lot of stuff. She found the Communist Manifesto handbook that was given out to weathermen in the bottom drawer of the previous Secretary of Education's desk. She found a bunch of communist infiltration into the concepts of human resource. People don't understand that human resource was a Stalin era concept that was absolutely hammered into our children. I was one of those kids that was hammered into, the time period. I was lucky enough to go to private schools, but with the conditioning, and there's even more conditioning today in which people give up their personal authority. They give up the concept of knowing right from wrong. We have this idea that's foisted upon us, and I can actually put a pin on it. It was 1978. In marketing, they discovered that people could be programmed because of the amount of screen time they were having. At that time, it was 20 hours per week. Today, it's in excess of 120 hours per week per person. And that screen time has been used to invoke into you the idea that you cannot be an authority of your own opinion, that you require external validation, and that validation can be acquired through popularity. So we have the like and dislike, we have the the votes on whether or not something is a legitimate answer. Talking about like Stack Exchange or Red Edit. Those the social media constructs use popularity of Facebook heavy, heavy, heavy. Even back during LifeLog when in '97 when they got funded, they were doing the farm game was the model used to create adoption and the interface and everything. People don't even understand that Facebook was basically Netscape Communicator. They were forked from the same source. Um, you had all the same tools you had in Facebook and Netscape Communicator. It wasn't a better interface. It was just simply they slammed it in your face repeatedly, put it everywhere, paid for it to be everywhere, marketed it to you. That's why it gained popularity, not because it had a better interface. Now, in that, the popularity aspect, the idea that popular things rise to the top. This is called social resonance. That was replaced with the construct of popularity. And different people over the years actually have used it really successfully. A guy named Larry Green, who happened to be neighbor next town over, Larry Green created Boys to Men and In Sync, the two boy bands. And if you look on the albums, he's the fifth member of the band. Both of those bands were constructs of popularity, and they were used as a marketing tool to market the music. Now, the music was catchy, whatever, it was appealing, but it wasn't as popular. It wouldn't have resonated as well as it did. Now, same thing goes for Twitter. Twitter is basically an extension of the 148 character logs from Global Communicator paging logs. When it was released to the wild in 2004, they literally took the code that was used in the paging system and pushed it out. That's the LifeLog. 97 to 2004 was DARPA's heavy funding of it, but Global Communicator was the predecessor of it, and total informational awareness was created out of that. So we're talking mid 90s is when they really got concentrated on messing with people's minds. Now, where it's gotten to today is because of this idea of popularity being equal to validity, that people will seek popularity over confirmation. In other words, they cannot deal with documented reality if it, quote, doesn't resonate with a popular belief. So this is a control structure that's actually easily broken. We marketed a stupid pet rock holster. A leather guy had a bunch of leather scraps and made holsters for pet rocks. He spent $432,000, so $1.8 million worth of pet rock holsters. Absolutely absurd, but it became popular because it was intended to be popular, not because it resonated with people. It was absurd. Now, we have the exact same thing going on today. So popular beliefs, the narrative or the narrative, is actually being constructed through popularity. And we really need to understand that popularity, like authority, doesn't equate. So popularity and validity are not equals. Authority and power are not equals. And if we can conceive of the fact that we can have a diminutive, less than popular, a lot of people don't resonate with it, but still it has inherent truth concept, that there are such things as fixed truths, things that are empirical. You can touch them, you can taste them, you can feel them. And it doesn't matter how many people agree with it. Those are validity. The idea of popularity is, I love the concept. There's one concept that was expressed as shit must taste great, otherwise how could 93 trillion flies be wrong? Look how popular it is. And that's demonstrating the absurdity of popularity.
Yeah, I'll never forget. I don't know who said this, but it always stuck with me. It's nothing true is popular and nothing popular is true. All right. We'll finish up here with Michael Ray. Go ahead.
So thank you for taking my last question, David. Really brilliant, unbelievable information. Uh, as we come upon this next phase of what we're all going to be doing, including you, obviously, what do you see as the toughest challenge to overcome? Because obviously these systems, the social media and all these apparatuses have been in place for quite some time. You worked on a lot of them, but how do you see us overcoming? The I guess waking up others, because in terms of them not wanting to, or if it's traumatic induced, finding it difficult to stop following the numbers and stop following the influence. Do you think that that's going to be very difficult to overcome?
Well, there's been several statements that the future's not for everyone, the truth's not for everyone. Um, I've come to realize that there's this concept of the fugue state, where facing reality or facing truth, when I say truth, I'm talking about empirical, factual stuff, sometimes is more horrific than retreating back into the pretend land in the fugue. This is a technique that was actually used, and if you guys ever get a chance, there's a great 1980s crappy made video that really does a great job of describing this. It was long before the Matrix. It was called A Virtual Nightmare, and it was a made-for-TV movie. If I have it, I'll stick it up on the share on the World Freedom thing. Not World Freedom, on Mysteries of Earth. But the idea of a limited hangout creating this alternate reality. Well, first off, the premise of it is that there was broadcast towers broadcasting an artificial reality into the mass of people, and one guy discovers a librarian who shows him a book that has the pipe is not a pipe. I was going to say it in German, but the pipe is not. This is not a pipe. That famous painting. It's a picture of a pipe. It's not the pipe itself. So this concept is what broke him free and allowed him to see that he was actually in a virtual world of matrix make-believe fugue state generated by this beam that came in. And the first experience that he had was he fell through to a post-apocalyptic world where everything was rotting and horrible and black and just absolutely recoil from it, okay? Which immediately sent him back into the virtual reality. And then he kept having problems where he was having these dreams and fell through into realizing that he was in this dream state. And in that, a second fake reality, in that he was a controller of the reality. He was promoted, sent to the city in which everybody knew that they were controlling this virtual reality. Where the simple fact is that neither the controllers nor the darkness was real. It was all a construct. And that the actual truth of the matter is that it was cardboard and very cheaply, the cheapest way, the simplest way to do it. And I think people in the fugue state, the people I see in the grocery store, absolutely terrified, look at absolute fear in their eyes, still have their face masked up. They've gotten their 6 shots now, and they're freaking dying from it. Well, the time to reach those people has long since passed. We need to, and I know this is kind of brutal, but we need to cut bait. We need to start focusing on building out our future rather than trying to save people in the mouth of a lion. And it's pretty hardcore. It's not a Christian thing to think, but we have a real serious problem ahead of us here. Now, we're going to lose, like I said, at least 2 billion people, and our society is barely functional on the population we currently have. We rely so heavily on centralized automated process, and the WEF is wanting to push us into this environment of only 500 million of us, and they control everything and they dictate everything, and they're dumbasses. They're talking about creating a city that's only 200 yards wide and circumnavigates the earth, right? Just absolutely insane. Now, this idea of 15-minute city and everything's going to be wine and roses, everybody will be happy. Nonsense. Now, where we have to actually do is those who are able to perceive, we need to create structures that enable us to survive. That's the very first, most critical part of any effort that we should have now. We should have information available for those who seek it, but we shouldn't be trying to reach the masses. The masses are it's past time. We only had about 12% of the population on Earth vaccinated. We're going to lose a large percent, and I know they're telling you 60% and 80%. Bullshit. Actually count the number of vaccines destroyed and the total number of vaccines manufactured, and it leaves you down with about 12%, which correlates with the number of deaths. It correlates with what we're actually seeing in the statistical world. Now, this attack on humanity was to reduce the impact of our common morphic resonance. These WEFers know exactly what I'm talking about, with our intent being able to control the expression of reality. They're absolutely aware of it. Their religious belief tells them that their things that they worship are returning, and they have to eliminate 13/14 of the world's population, get us down under 500 million, okay, so that they're able to control everything. This is their belief, not mine. Now, those people who have willfully given over to it, which there are a large number who have actually decided they're going to go with the winning team because they believe CNN, they believe Fox News, they believe CS, MSNBC, CBS, all the mainstream. They believe that shit. And they actually believe that what they're experiencing when they see something with their own eyes is a delusion. So we can, cite biblical reference of a great deception. I think we're there. Okay. Now, how do we save as many people as we possibly can and help as many people as we possibly can? We got to create the parallel structures. We cannot rely. I mean, right now, you guys go to the grocery store, you buy conventional eggs, right? And they're what, $10 a dozen? Some places $18 a dozen. I'm actually stunned. I go grocery shopping. I eat solely organic. All the products that I normally buy every week are still there. They're still there because majority of people are buying the garbage that they've been poisoned with their entire lives. And they think organic is some kind of a freaky ripoff or, some kind of nonsense. Yeah, like dozens of eggs, $5.99 a dozen. My wife bought organic eggs 2 days ago. So, there was a post today about Connecticut. There was an egg farm, chicken farm burning. The reason they're doing that is because their minds don't work on competition. They work on the concepts of monopoly. So they're not going to try to convince you that crickets are the best thing in the world to eat. That'll come later. What they're going to do is they're going to make it so that you have no other protein choice but to use crickets. See, that's a monopolistic effort. Now, the number of people that we're going to lose currently, the way that it is right now, I estimate to be about 2 billion people. And that's because they've already killed off the cattle on a conventional food source. They've killed off the wheat crops. Now they're attacking chickens and eggs with the feed and with, burning down chicken houses or creating fake avian viruses. It's funny. None of the individual farms have had any problem with any kind of an avian virus that they had to kill all the birds. Okay, not happening. So How do we reach people? I think we've reached everybody who's going to be the first tier. And as we move forward, living our lives will be a great way to break people out of the the fugue state they're in. Some people are still on the edge. They're still looking at, the limited hangouts as being truthful. When I'm talking about the CIA type limited hangout stuff, they're looking at or waiting for. This is another technique of despotism, is that the savior is coming. There's always going to be, Trump's return. There's going to be, the return of the hostages from Iran. All these, everything will be better when this happens, right? Well, that shit don't work, and it's never been the case. What we've done is we've enabled them to incrementally gain strength and gain power by our capitulation. Now, as we run around and we try to reach all these people, we're expending our energy that could be better spent teaching young kids. You take a look in the schools right now. I'm stunned by what I see my grandkids watching on cartoons on Saturday. It's not even Saturday anymore. It's every day. They got all this crap, environmental nonsense and social justice crap being fed into their little brains. And, their mom's, a good mom, but, their mom and dad are working people, and they're trying to get by, so they don't focus on that, and they're not aware of it. I think as content generators, all of us can actually start producing stuff that's a more attractive alternative without even trying to challenge them. So in other words, instead of showing the riots in Atlanta, we show the celebrations in, what was it, Carolinas or Connecticut today? Where was Trump today? Anybody know?
I think so. I think South Carolina.
Yeah, there were people out on the side of the road having a blast, with signs and American flags. That's what we need to show people. Look, we're not hiding behind our desk because, some freaks in Atlanta are blowing shit up because something happened in Memphis that was organized. Okay? But that's what we're shown. We're not shown the Peruvian people uprising. We're not shown the Australian people uprising. We're not shown any other crap. So we have to get these people to understand they need to turn that shit off. That maybe that's the big thing. Give them an alternative. And I think a lot of the truthers and a lot of the news channels, Mike Adams is great. I like his nutritional messages about the clean food, but he's too dark. I mean, it's doom and gloom every day. People are going to tune that out. Alex Jones is too much in your face. I mean, regardless of what the hell he's talking about, he's beating you up verbally to get the point across. We need to actually start focusing on how to create things that attract people, okay, that'll break them out of their fugue state. So, the unity thing, one of the, my choice in music has changed drastically recently. I mean, in the last 2 years, I'm listening to crap I never would have listened to before. Big fan of Tom McDonald, big fan of High Res. Both these guys have actually spoken truth to a genre that I consider repetitive and programmatic. I'm talking about the rap genre. And it breathed new life into it. It breathed something that was much needed. I think we can do that in country music. We can do that in movies. We can do that in everything. I see some of the stuff that's on TV now, and I'm actually like 2 or 3 minutes of it, and I'm done with it. They're out of control. I mean, even the movie channels and all that, the crap they're putting out is all of it is literal programming, and it's not enjoyable. So, to answer your question more directly after a 30-minute rant was we need to stop trying to reach people and start trying to entertain them. If we give them a more positive choice, I think we'll do much better. And proof of that is look at Kevin Sorbo. Kevin Sorbo's shows have always been positive and uplifting and had a positive message. And in spite of his ostracization from the mainstream, he's doing fine. Some of his content, like the Andromeda show and Hercules, is still on reruns, right? Still making money off from that. And I think content producers can, use that as an example of the kind of stuff that'll do really well. Does that answer?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, it sounds like the bigger point would be if we have the ability to circumvent these systems, we absolutely should do so as soon as possible, and then the others will basically come along with.
Yeah, it's my project, which I'm not here to pitch my project or anything like that. I'll do that later, but my project ever since 2008 has been to create a common ledger. Just the ability to have arbitrage, to have exposure for trade. My company back then, it was called Broadmine Energy. We were developing breakthrough energy products, and we got some really cool stuff. And we have products that other people brought to us to try to insert into our sales channels. And the resistance that we got from academia was out of fucking control. I mean, perfect examples. We have this stupid little printed plastic hose connector that I paid to have the American Concrete Institute and Sensico down in Peru, which is all of South America, follows the recommendations of Sensico. It's just a private magazine, but they kind of act like the default UL Labs or American Concrete Institute. But we had this device tested. Now, you take regular water, you pour it in a bucket, add the concrete, mix it up, you pour the water through this plastic thing, mix the concrete up, and the concrete's 20% stronger. No shit. It's a real deal thing. Now, the guy who invented it had all these new age mystical descriptions of how it was, generating vortices in the spiritual aspect of the water and purifying it. I'm talking about spiritually purifying it. And I said, no, we're not going to market it that way. You're out of control on that. Let's just simply say this shit makes concrete 20% stronger, which is a valid, provable, empirical evidence. And the damn thing sold. Now, other products, like we had a battery charger that broke two axioms of electrical physics. It did so by using the inertia of charge carriers as part of the charge energy that went into the battery. So, for instance, a 12 kilowatt charging source takes 26 hours to fully charge 184 volt, 800 amp hour battery. With our device, it only took 2 hours to charge the battery fully. So, working with Graz University is a world-renowned Austrian electrical physics or electrophysics university. They accused us of fraud. They tested it. We actually had it in cars. It charges batteries. And the way that it does it is it calculates the amount of time that a charge carrier moves through the substrate or the electrolyte and stops the pulse movement and leaves the pulse continue on its inertia. In other words, the charge particle or charge carrier moves with inertial force hitting the plate, charging the plates. And that system also works with anodizing, where standard anodizing would take a certain amount of current per inch, per square inch of area and depth, how deep the anodizing goes in. Ours was significantly, like 60% more efficient. In electrolysis, the system actually meets the ideal where theoretical on electrolysis is 2.3 volts to break water in half, and practical is 1.23 volts, and practical is 1.48 volts. And we were actually able to break water at 1.23 volts, making it 100% efficient. And that was in violation of rules of thermodynamics. Okay, so we constructed this company with these products in our catalog, and we got a lot of grief for it. Now, I start looking at, well, how the hell do we sell this shit? There's no channel to put it in. You can't take it to a conventional distributorship, because that distributor is going to have academia verify the technology, and the first thing they do is spit it out. We built a solar collector that actually produces 25 kilowatts of energy off from a 240 square foot reflective surface. That's impossible according to all of the textbooks written since 1985. And we extracted 66% of the available heat out of a fuel instead of the Carnot number, which is around 11 to 12%. So, all these, again, academic axioms are ignoring what empirical stuff is. So all this drove us to actually look at a way to actually create secondary markets where you're not reliant on this control grid, this absolute barrier to entry. There's this huge barrier to entry on any product. There's a requirement of mass manufacture. There's, all these things to meet what our constructed world, the paradigm is about. Now, in doing that, it attracted a lot of attention from other groups of people, and we met up with the blockchain guys back in 2007. And all through 2007 to 2013, my guys, three of us, were working with a total of 40 guys on writing the exchange software for blockchain. So we did the pooling software and the exchange system. Now, one of the spin-offs of that was we developed a little device using the flip chip card that became the credit cards in 2018. They start shipping these. Everybody has a chip in their card now. That processor that's in there actually has a lot more capability than what the banks are willing to enable. So we had a card the size of 4 credit cards thick with an e-paper interface. A company called Adaptive Path made these cards for us, and we showed it at the 2007 or 2009 Consumer Electronics Show, the 2009 Consumer Electronics Show, and it was called Mozilla Labs Aurora. And we tagged it on to the new browser concept using a piece of Apple software, or a concept of metadata control called Project X from Apple, which you basically used your fingers to zoom through the web, and items of interest would pop up as icons that you could zoom in on. You had groups of content, and then you had localization, so location services, and all this was on a credit card sized device that had a low lithium battery and charged overnight. And it was a little slow, but it was early on, so we knew that would get better. Later we did a set of 4 pens that changing the metaphor and the paradigm of using computer systems or using an exchange. We have a laser projected keyboard, a laser projected monitor, and one memory unit and one processing unit, 4 pens. So it was 4 stylish, looked like Mont Blanc pens that you could carry around. That was your whole computer, portable and all that. Now, none of these products made it through the mass market filter. So we continued on with developing the exchange after we discovered the problems in blockchain. There are some serious problems with blockchain. It is not distributed. It is not what is claimed to be. It absolutely is not what it's claimed to be. Now, what we did develop was a system that updates to the ledger take 128 milliseconds. Reconciliation on the ledger takes 4 milliseconds. Now, the current exchange system for cryptocurrencies can take up to 72 hours for your crypto to actually be sold for currency and exchanged into your exchange account. Now, what the exchanges do is they run a fractional reserve of coins, and they run a fractional reserve of various currencies that they're working in and out of. So they act as a fake, it's a Ponzi scheme. They never have enough money to cover what's in the accounts. Now, not our intent. That was where the FBI and the casino owners took it after we gave up on the blockchain. Now, with the ability to do instantaneous transactions, we're also able to determine whether or not you have permission to use a packet of information. So we can encrypt at the packet level and do digital rights management real time at the packet level using the ledger. So ledger is inherent in the networking system, which allows secure private communication. And this is black route communication. This is basically similar to the dark web, but completely legal. The original intent, we had developed a telephone, a TV set-top box, router on a stick, which I'm looking at right now. It's a little cube, and a NAS device, network area storage device, that would connect and find every other one of them on the internet and set up the network independently. In 2020, December, we had ordered 50,000 units, and we were informed that there was a processor shortage and our orders were canceled. In January 24th of 2021, it became possible, using a top-level domain, to actually implement this whole system in a web browser. Now, we've since found out that the approvals for top-level domains have been curtailed to sometime in 2023. 2025, sorry, 2 years out. And that may be pushed back further. So we're currently in development on a dongle device that will function as a top-level domain. So you'll have a device about the size of a car key that you allow to connect to your cell phone or allow to connect to your computer. And that will actually bridge the network and create the basis for the parallel infrastructure. Now, one of the unique things that we figured out on this network is that in order to enable currencies of any type at retail, it doesn't require that the retailer have any adoption. We're using NACHA, Visa, MasterCard, and the coupon exchange in escrow accounts in those systems, so that you're able to use your balance in the ledger to buy a gallon of milk. You can literally take your balance and exchange it. You want to sell it for US dollars to buy that gallon of milk. You simply swipe, generates a QRP code, you trade it, or you hit transfer, and it transfers it to your debit card, and you use your debit card, just like a bank. Now, all this system isn't theoretical. We prove this. This has been run through the courts, and we're desperately trying to get some developers. We need some basic stuff done. I'm not going to do everything. I'm terminal, so it would be stupid for me to try to do everything. And, we have an all call out for people to help us out on this. So BA has done a really great join video that we're waiting on getting a couple interfaces created before we launch that video. And anybody who's willing to, that can write some code, get a hold of me. We can use the help, and we're offering partnerships. Oh, the other thing is this is not going to be a top-down structure. This is community owned. So anybody who's a member actually owns a piece of the company. So the company is only a structure in order to create the distribution of asset within the company. In other words, you need the actual fiction of a company to actually have a communal ownership. So that's my gift to the world as I die, right? Is a way around this shit.
All right. Oh, awesome. Thank you guys so much for joining in. And if anybody has any questions, I'm sure Dave's a chatty fellow. You can hit him up inside any of the channels that you probably found him through here. And we're going to end the recording now. So everybody have a great evening and keep on keeping on.
Good night, everyone, and God bless each and every one of them, all your family, and all that you endeavor to do.